In the modern world, the quiet reliability of running water and unseen sewage systems has become so ordinary that it is rarely noticed. A tap opens, clean water appears, and what is no longer needed disappears through pipes hidden behind walls and beneath streets. The stability of this arrangement creates the impression that sanitation is a recent invention, and that earlier societies lived in permanent disorder. Medieval cities, in particular, are often imagined as places overwhelmed by filth, disease, and neglect. Yet the reality was more structured, more intentional, and in many cases more organized than this assumption suggests. Medieval urban communities could not afford chaos in matters of waste and water. Survival depended on creating repeatable systems that allowed dense populations to function without collapsing under their own byproducts. Long before modern plumbing, cities developed routines, regulations, and physical infrastructure that managed sanitation in ways that were imperfect, but far from absent. To understand how these systems worked, it is necessary first to recognize the basic challenge medieval towns faced. Urban density concentrates both resources and hazards. Wells can become contaminated. Streets can become impassable. Food markets can attract animals that spread disease. Without intervention, the very concentration that made trade and craft possible would quickly become unsustainable. Medieval authorities, whether municipal councils, guild leaders, or local lords, were therefore forced to treat sanitation not as a luxury, but as a requirement for economic survival. A city that became known for foul water or recurring sickness would lose merchants, travelers, and tax revenue. Cleanliness, even when defined differently than today, had measurable financial value. Water supply formed the foundation of these systems. Many medieval cities relied on a combination of wells, rivers, and engineered conduits. In regions influenced by earlier Roman infrastructure, remnants of aqueducts and cistern networks continued to shape settlement patterns. Even where such structures had deteriorated, the memory of controlled water movement remained part of local knowledge. Public wells were often regulated spaces rather than informal gathering points. Rules governed what could be washed nearby, where animals could drink, and how buckets were handled. These regulations were not always perfectly enforced, but their existence demonstrates an awareness that water sources required protection from contamination. In larger towns, water carriers became a recognized occupation. These individuals transported water from cleaner sources to households that lacked direct access. Their work created an early form of distributed infrastructure, relying on human labor instead of pipes. While slow by modern standards, the system allowed neighborhoods to function without each dwelling needing its own well. Waste disposal required even more deliberate organization. Contrary to popular imagery, refuse was not simply thrown into the nearest street without consequence. Many cities maintained designated dumping areas outside their walls, where organic waste could decompose or be repurposed. The distance of these sites reduced odor and limited the attraction of pests within populated areas. Within the city itself, regulations often required residents to keep the space directly in front of their homes reasonably clear. This responsibility created a patchwork sanitation model in which collective cleanliness emerged from individual obligation. Failure to comply could result in fines, not primarily for moral reasons, but because accumulated waste interfered with movement, trade, and defense readiness. Street design also played a subtle but important role. Many medieval streets were intentionally sloped toward central gutters. Rainwater, unpredictable yet frequent in much of Europe, functioned as a natural flushing mechanism. When storms passed through, accumulated debris was carried toward lower drainage points or nearby waterways. This reliance on weather was inconsistent, but it reduced the need for constant manual removal. Human waste presented a more sensitive challenge. In wealthier households, privies were often constructed over cesspits or channels that could be periodically emptied. Specialized workers, sometimes operating at night, removed this material and transported it outside city limits. Though unpleasant, the task formed a recognized and necessary profession within the urban economy. In some regions, waste was not purely discarded but reused. Agricultural communities surrounding cities valued certain types of organic refuse as fertilizer. This exchange created an early circular system in which urban byproducts supported rural productivity. The arrangement was not driven by environmental philosophy, but by practical necessity and resource scarcity. Disease, often associated with medieval sanitation failures, was understood differently at the time. The prevailing theory linked illness to foul air rather than microscopic organisms. As a result, efforts to reduce odor were seen as directly related to health. Streets were cleaned, incense or herbs were burned, and stagnant water was discouraged not only for comfort, but for perceived medical protection. While this framework did not address the true causes of many infections, it still produced behaviors that incidentally reduced certain risks. Removing standing waste, improving airflow, and separating water sources from refuse could lower exposure to some pathogens, even without an understanding of bacteria. Municipal records from various European cities reveal repeated attempts to refine these systems. Ordinances were issued specifying where butchers could discard remains, when markets had to be cleaned, and how frequently waste pits should be emptied. These rules suggest an ongoing process of trial and adjustment rather than neglect. It is important to recognize that medieval sanitation was not uniform across all regions. Wealth, geography, climate, and political stability influenced how effective local systems became. A prosperous trading city with strong guild structures could maintain more consistent enforcement than a smaller settlement facing frequent conflict. Even so, the persistence of these efforts indicates that urban populations understood the connection between environmental conditions and collective well-being. Cleanliness was not pursued as an abstract virtue, but as a practical requirement for maintaining trade routes, property values, and civic reputation. Over time, incremental improvements accumulated. Covered drains appeared in some districts. Water channels were redirected to reduce contamination. Market regulations became more detailed. Each change was modest, but together they created a form of infrastructural continuity that allowed cities to endure for centuries. This gradual evolution challenges the common assumption that modern sanitation emerged suddenly during the industrial era. Instead, later innovations built upon habits, expectations, and administrative practices that had been forming since the medieval period. The idea that a city must manage waste systematically was not new. Only the technology used to achieve it changed. Seen from this perspective, medieval sanitation systems were less a story of failure and more a story of constrained problem-solving. Limited tools, incomplete medical knowledge, and fluctuating resources forced communities to rely on organization, repetition, and shared responsibility. These methods were imperfect, yet sufficiently effective to support growing populations and expanding trade networks. Understanding how these cities functioned also reframes the relationship between infrastructure and culture. Sanitation was not merely a technical issue. It influenced daily routines, shaped occupations, and defined expectations of civic behavior. The presence of waste collectors, water carriers, and street wardens reflected a society quietly structured around maintenance. Maintenance, rather than innovation, was often the defining feature of medieval urban life. Systems did not need to be flawless. They needed to be repeatable. A cesspit that could be emptied, a gutter that could be cleared, or a well that could be protected year after year represented a form of stability that residents could rely upon. In this sense, permanence in medieval cities did not mean immobility or grandeur. It meant the ability to restore function after disruption. Floods, fires, and disease outbreaks repeatedly tested urban resilience. The cities that survived were those that could repair their sanitation routines quickly enough to prevent long-term decline. By examining these overlooked mechanisms, how water was gathered, how waste was moved, how odors were reduced, it becomes possible to see medieval urban life not as a static backdrop, but as an active system constantly balancing density with sustainability. The quiet labor required to keep streets usable and wells drinkable formed the unseen foundation beneath markets, churches, and workshops. The modern expectation that infrastructure should be invisible has obscured how visible and communal these processes once were. In medieval towns, sanitation was not hidden behind walls. It was negotiated in public spaces, enforced through shared rules, and maintained through occupations that everyone recognized. This visibility created accountability. When waste accumulated, responsibility could be traced. When water became foul, the source was often identifiable. The system relied less on distant authorities and more on immediate social pressure, reinforced by fines and guild oversight. Over centuries, these practices shaped the administrative instincts that later supported large-scale engineering projects. The transition to underground sewers and piped water did not replace earlier thinking. It extended it. The expectation that a city must actively manage its byproducts had already been established long before industrial technology made large networks possible. In reconsidering medieval sanitation, what emerges is not a portrait of constant disorder, but one of constrained competence. Cities operated with limited knowledge yet developed routines capable of sustaining complex urban life. Their solutions were shaped by necessity, refined through repetition, and preserved through collective habit. The endurance of many European city centers, some continuously inhabited since the medieval period, quietly testifies to the effectiveness of these systems. Streets that still follow ancient drainage paths, districts still organized around historic water access, and property lines shaped by former waste routes all reflect decisions made centuries ago. What appears, at first glance, as an era defined by hardship reveals itself instead as a period of persistent adaptation. Medieval communities did not possess modern plumbing, but they possessed something equally essential: the recognition that survival in dense settlements required ongoing, organized care of shared space. The continuity of these systems becomes easier to understand when attention is turned from dramatic events toward ordinary routines. Medieval cities were sustained not by occasional grand interventions, but by the steady repetition of small, necessary tasks. Each morning, streets that had accumulated debris during the previous day were swept or cleared enough to allow carts to pass. Market areas, which produced large amounts of organic refuse, were among the first spaces to be addressed, because their usability directly affected food distribution. This daily rhythm created an early form of predictable urban maintenance. Residents expected that certain spaces would be usable at particular times, and that expectation shaped behavior. Vendors set up where drainage was reliable. Households disposed of refuse according to known collection habits. Even in the absence of modern engineering, consistency allowed complexity to function. Seasonal change added another layer of difficulty. During warmer months, odor and rapid decomposition increased the urgency of waste removal. In colder seasons, frozen ground could make cesspit maintenance more difficult, while reduced rainfall meant that natural street flushing occurred less often. Municipal responses were therefore not static. Records from several European towns indicate that regulations were adjusted depending on weather patterns, market cycles, and disease outbreaks. Rivers, which provided essential water access, also presented constant risk. Many cities developed informal zoning practices along their banks. Activities likely to contaminate water, such as tanning or dyeing, were often restricted to specific downstream sections. While enforcement varied, the intent reveals an understanding that different uses of water needed separation to protect the broader population. Bridges and river crossings became important control points within this system. Because traffic converged at these locations, authorities could monitor what entered and left the city, including carts carrying waste. Tolls and inspections were not solely about taxation or security. They also functioned as opportunities to regulate the movement of materials that affected urban cleanliness. Within residential districts, architecture itself contributed to sanitation management. Overhanging upper stories, common in many medieval streets, are often remembered only for creating narrow passageways. Yet these structures also shaped how rainwater moved, channeling runoff toward established gutters. Roof angles, eaves, and stone thresholds all influenced whether water pooled or continued flowing toward drainage paths. Courtyards inside larger buildings served as controlled environments where waste could be temporarily stored before removal. These enclosed spaces reduced direct exposure on busy streets and allowed households to manage disposal on scheduled days. The presence of such semi-private zones demonstrates that sanitation was integrated into building design rather than treated as an afterthought. Occupational specialization continued to expand as cities grew. Beyond night soil collectors and water carriers, some towns employed officials responsible for inspecting streets and reporting violations. Their authority was limited, but their existence shows that sanitation had become an administrative concern rather than purely a personal one. Written notices, fines, and public announcements reinforced expectations about acceptable behavior. Guilds, which organized many aspects of economic life, also played indirect roles in maintaining environmental standards. Crafts that produced significant waste, such as butchery, metalworking, or leather processing, were often required to operate in designated areas. Concentrating these activities made cleanup more manageable and reduced conflict with residential neighborhoods. It also allowed experienced workers to develop practical methods for handling byproducts efficiently. Public spaces required particular attention because they served multiple functions throughout the day. A market square might host trade in the morning, civic gatherings in the afternoon, and social activity in the evening. Maintaining usability across these transitions depended on coordinated cleaning efforts. Even when resources were limited, cities recognized that neglected central spaces could disrupt both commerce and governance. Religious institutions frequently contributed to these efforts, not only through moral instruction but through direct management of nearby land. Monasteries and churches often maintained wells, gardens, and enclosed grounds where order and cleanliness were visibly enforced. These areas provided examples, sometimes idealized, of how controlled environments could reduce disorder. Their presence within or near cities influenced broader expectations about maintenance. Sound also formed part of the sanitation landscape. Bells, horns, or public calls signaled times for market closure, curfews, or designated disposal periods. These auditory cues coordinated collective behavior in the absence of centralized scheduling systems. When residents knew when certain activities were expected, compliance became easier to achieve. It is important to note that effectiveness varied widely. Sudden population growth could overwhelm existing arrangements. Periods of conflict disrupted labor availability. Flooding could carry contaminants into wells despite precautions. Medieval sanitation was resilient but not invulnerable. Failures occurred, sometimes with severe consequences. Even so, repeated recovery after such disruptions demonstrates a capacity for institutional memory. Cities rebuilt routines after fires, re-established dumping routes after sieges, and restored wells after contamination. Knowledge was preserved through practice rather than technical manuals. Experienced workers trained apprentices, and customary rules passed from one generation to the next. The relationship between waste and value remained complex. Materials considered refuse in one context could become resources in another. Ash from hearths was used in certain crafts. Animal remains supported trades such as glue making or tanning. This partial recycling reduced the total volume requiring disposal and linked sanitation to broader economic networks. Lighting conditions influenced when unpleasant tasks were performed. Night offered cooler temperatures and fewer bystanders, making it the preferred time for emptying cesspits or transporting waste through crowded districts. This scheduling minimized disruption to daytime commerce and reduced exposure to strong odors. The rhythm of sanitation work was therefore tied not only to necessity but to social tolerance. City walls, often discussed primarily as defensive structures, also shaped environmental management. By defining a clear boundary, they made it easier to designate exterior zones for dumping, composting, or processing waste. Gates functioned as regulated passage points where movement could be observed. The physical separation between interior living space and exterior disposal areas reinforced the idea that cleanliness inside required controlled transfer outside. As populations increased, some cities experimented with more permanent drainage channels lined with stone or wood. These early conduits did not resemble modern sewers, but they represented incremental attempts to guide wastewater along predictable paths. Maintenance remained essential. Blockages could quickly reverse any benefit, so periodic clearing was built into routine labor schedules. Travelers' accounts from the period occasionally remark on the relative cleanliness of certain towns compared with others. While such observations are subjective, they indicate that sanitation contributed to reputation. A city perceived as orderly and tolerable to inhabit was more likely to attract merchants and skilled workers. Environmental conditions thus influenced long-term economic competitiveness. Education about proper conduct was often delivered through public proclamations rather than formal schooling. Town criers announced new regulations, and written notices were posted in prominent locations. Compliance depended on awareness as much as enforcement. When residents understood expectations, collective habits became easier to sustain. Over generations, these intertwined practices, architectural design, occupational roles, municipal rules, seasonal adjustments, and social pressure, formed a dense network of maintenance. No single element guaranteed cleanliness, but together they produced a workable balance between urban density and environmental risk. The system's strength lay in redundancy. If one method failed, others could compensate long enough for repairs to occur. This layered approach helps explain how medieval cities, despite limited technology, avoided continuous collapse under the pressures of crowding. Their sanitation systems were visible, labor-intensive, and sometimes inconsistent, yet they were grounded in a persistent recognition that shared spaces required shared responsibility. Over longer stretches of time, The effectiveness of these shared responsibilities depended less on any single rule and more on the habits that residents came to accept as ordinary. When expectations were repeated across years and generations, they gradually became part of civic identity. A town known for orderly streets or dependable wells did not achieve that reputation through occasional campaigns, but through countless small actions that residents performed without needing constant supervision. These habits were reinforced by visibility. In a medieval street, most aspects of sanitation were conducted in plain sight. Buckets were carried, gutters were cleared, and waste carts moved through familiar routes. Because these activities could be observed, they also invited comment and correction. Neighbors noticed when someone neglected the area outside their doorway, and local officials could quickly identify where problems were emerging. Social pressure, though informal, often proved more consistent than distant authority. Markets continued to serve as focal points where environmental management and economic necessity intersected. Fresh produce, meat, fish, and dairy all generated refuse that could not remain in place without consequence. Many towns required vendors to remove or consolidate waste at the end of trading hours. This routine allowed the same space to return to public use by the following day. The transformation of a busy market back into an open square depended on predictable cleanup, not on occasional intervention. Weather remained an unpredictable partner in these efforts. Heavy rain could assist by washing debris toward drainage paths, but prolonged storms also risked overflowing channels and spreading contamination. In response, some communities placed stones, wooden grates, or simple barriers along gutters to slow the movement of larger debris. These modest additions reduced blockages and reveal a practical understanding that water flow needed guidance rather than blind reliance. Smell, often discussed in modern descriptions as a sign of medieval neglect, was in fact treated as an indicator that something required attention. Strong or persistent odors suggested stagnation, and stagnation implied danger within the prevailing medical beliefs of the time. Households burned herbs, spread fresh straw, or increased ventilation not merely for comfort, but because improving the sensory environment was thought to improve health. While the underlying theory was incomplete, the resulting behaviors sometimes reduced exposure to harmful conditions. Public authority, though limited by modern standards, attempted to standardize these responses. Town councils issued periodic reminders about keeping drainage paths clear or maintaining private waste pits. Enforcement could be inconsistent, especially in periods of political tension, yet the repeated reissuance of such orders shows that sanitation remained a standing concern rather than an occasional reaction to crisis. The layout of neighborhoods also influenced how effectively routines could be maintained. Densely packed districts required more frequent waste removal simply because accumulation occurred faster. In contrast, areas with small gardens or open yards could temporarily absorb organic refuse through composting or animal feeding. This variation meant that a single set of rules rarely applied evenly across an entire city. Local adaptation was necessary, and experienced residents understood which practices suited their immediate surroundings. Animals, both domesticated and stray, formed another variable within the urban environment. Pigs, dogs, and birds could consume certain types of refuse, reducing visible waste but also introducing new risks. Some cities permitted controlled animal presence for this reason, while others restricted it after outbreaks of disease or complaints from residents. The balance between usefulness and hazard shifted over time, reflecting ongoing experimentation rather than fixed policy. Trade networks introduced additional pressures. Ships arriving with grain, wool, or timber also brought packaging materials, spoiled goods, and ballast that required disposal. Port districts therefore developed their own maintenance routines, often separate from inland neighborhoods. Workers assigned to docks managed debris quickly to keep cargo moving, demonstrating how sanitation was closely tied to logistical efficiency. During periods of festival or large gatherings, ordinary systems could be temporarily overwhelmed. Extra refuse, crowded streets, and increased demand on wells forced authorities to organize short-term solutions such as additional collection runs or temporary dumping areas. These moments tested the flexibility of urban routines. Cities that adapted quickly could host events without long-lasting disruption, reinforcing their reputations as stable commercial centers. Knowledge about effective practices was rarely written in technical manuals, yet it persisted through apprenticeship and imitation. Younger workers learned how to judge when a cesspit was nearing capacity, how to position barrels to avoid spillage, or how to clear a gutter without damaging its lining. This practical expertise accumulated slowly, embedded in daily labor rather than formal instruction. Over time, certain physical features became trusted reference points within the sanitation landscape. A well known for reliable water, a drain that rarely clogged, or a dumping ground positioned downwind of prevailing breezes all gained informal status as dependable elements of the city's functioning. Residents adjusted their routines around these stable points, which helped reduce uncertainty in an environment where many factors remained beyond control. The cumulative effect of these practices was a form of resilience grounded in familiarity. When disruptions occurred, whether from storms, fire, or sudden illness, people did not need to invent entirely new systems. They restored what had worked before, drawing on shared memory of how streets were usually kept clear and how waste was typically removed. Recovery depended on recognition as much as on resources. In this way, medieval sanitation was sustained by a continuous feedback loop between environment, habit, and authority. Conditions in the streets informed new rules, rules shaped behavior, and behavior gradually altered conditions again. Progress was rarely dramatic, yet the steady refinement of routines allowed cities to support larger populations than their infrastructure might otherwise have permitted. As these feedback loops continued across generations, they gradually shaped not only how cities functioned, but how residents understood their relationship to shared space. Urban life required constant negotiation between private convenience and collective stability. A household might prefer the easiest possible disposal method, yet if too many individuals acted without regard for their neighbors, the consequences would quickly return in the form of blocked streets, foul water, or restricted trade. Over time, this tension encouraged the acceptance of small inconveniences in exchange for broader reliability. Civic identity began to form around these expectations. To belong to a town was not only to live within its walls, but to participate in its maintenance. Paying fines, contributing labor during designated cleanup periods, or simply keeping the immediate frontage clear became quiet signals of participation in urban life. These actions rarely appeared in grand chronicles, yet they defined whether daily routines remained workable. Written ordinances reveal how often authorities revisited the same concerns. Instructions about where refuse could be placed, how far waste pits should be from wells, or which streets required priority clearing appear repeatedly across decades. This repetition does not necessarily indicate failure. Instead, it reflects the reality that sanitation was an ongoing process requiring reinforcement as populations changed and new residents arrived without prior knowledge of local customs. Population movement itself created continual adjustment. Migrants from rural areas brought different habits regarding animals, composting, or water use. Cities had to absorb these differences without allowing them to disrupt existing systems. public announcements, visible examples set by established households, and occasional penalties helped align newcomers with prevailing practices. In this way, sanitation routines also functioned as tools of cultural integration. Infrastructure, though modest, slowly accumulated layers of improvement. A ditch once cut into packed earth might later be lined with stone to prevent erosion. A frequently contaminated well could be deepened or partially enclosed. Timber covers were added to channels where debris regularly caused blockages. None of these changes transformed the system overnight, yet each reduced the likelihood of recurring problems. The city evolved through maintenance rather than replacement. Fire, a constant threat in densely built districts, had indirect effects on sanitation as well. After destructive blazes, rebuilding offered opportunities to adjust street widths, reposition drainage paths, or relocate particularly troublesome trades. Reconstruction periods were disruptive, but they also allowed practical lessons to be incorporated into new layouts. In this sense, disaster sometimes accelerated improvements that routine conditions might have delayed. Economic incentives continued to reinforce environmental order. Merchants preferred routes where carts could move without obstruction and where customers did not avoid certain areas, persistent odor or standing water. Property values, though not measured in modern terms, were influenced by proximity to clean wells and passable streets. Households invested effort in maintaining surroundings because neglect had visible consequences for trade and reputation. The sensory experience of the city, its smells, sounds, and textures, remained a primary source of information for residents. Before laboratory testing or formal inspections, people relied on observation. Cloudy water, unusual insects, or lingering dampness signaled that attention was needed. This reliance on the senses encouraged frequent, small corrections rather than waiting for large failures. The environment was read continuously, much like weather or seasonal change. Children growing up within these settings learned expectations early. They watched adults sweep thresholds, avoid certain dumping spots, or wait for designated collection times. Through imitation, maintenance behaviors became normalized long before individuals understood the broader reasoning behind them. Cultural continuity depended less on written instruction and more on repeated exposure to routine. Over centuries, the cumulative effect of these patterns produced urban landscapes that, while still vulnerable to disease and disruption, were far from unmanaged. Streets aligned with drainage, occupations dedicated to removal, and customs governing shared resources formed an interlocking system. Its components were simple, yet their coordination allowed cities to persist through fluctuations in population, climate, and political authority. By the late medieval period, some towns had developed reputations specifically tied to orderliness and dependable public spaces. Travelers noted where water tasted clean, where markets were easy to navigate, and where overnight stays felt tolerable. Such impressions influenced trade routes and seasonal migration, subtly rewarding communities that sustained consistent sanitation habits. Seen in this longer view, medieval urban cleanliness was not a fixed achievement but a continuous practice. Each generation inherited partially functioning systems and the responsibility to keep them usable. The goal was rarely perfection. Instead, it was the preservation of conditions stable enough to support work, worship, exchange, and rest within close quarters. Through repetition, adaptation, and shared expectation, cities maintained a balance that allowed dense human settlement to endure long before modern plumbing made that balance easier to sustain. This long continuity also influenced how authority itself was perceived within medieval towns. Governance was not experienced only through proclamations or distant rulers, but through the everyday presence of small regulations that shaped shared environments. When a gutter was cleared on schedule or a dumping ground was kept beyond the walls, residents encountered authority as a practical force that enabled ordinary life to proceed with fewer interruptions. Trust in local administration, when it existed, often grew from these visible, repeatable outcomes rather than from abstract loyalty. Timekeeping played a subtle role in sustaining these arrangements. Without precise mechanical coordination in earlier centuries, communities relied on bells, daylight, and customary hours to organize tasks. The same signals that opened markets or announced curfews also structured moments when certain kinds of waste could be moved or when streets were expected to be passable for carts. Predictable timing reduced conflict, because residents could anticipate when unpleasant but necessary work would occur and plan their routines around it. As trade expanded and towns became more interconnected, comparisons between cities grew more common. Merchants traveling familiar routes quickly noticed which locations maintained reliable wells, which harbors were kept clear of debris, and which streets remained usable after rain. These observations circulated through conversation and correspondence, gradually forming reputations that influenced where future commerce would concentrate. In this way, sanitation contributed quietly to regional hierarchies of prosperity. Materials available in different regions shaped distinct solutions to similar problems. In areas with abundant stone, drains and well linings could be made more durable, reducing the frequency of collapse or contamination. Where timber was plentiful, wooden channels and covers provided flexible, if shorter-lived, alternatives. Clay soils allowed the shaping of simple pipes or sealed pits. None of these materials created a fully enclosed sewer network, yet each offered incremental control over how water and waste moved through crowded districts. Labor organization adapted alongside these physical features. Some towns rotated responsibility for certain cleaning tasks among residents, while others collected fees to support dedicated workers. The choice often depended on local wealth and population density. Rotational systems fostered a shared sense of obligation, but could be uneven in quality. Paid specialists offered greater consistency, yet required reliable revenue. Many cities used a mixture of both, assigning routine upkeep to households while reserving more demanding work for experienced crews. Moments of crisis, particularly outbreaks of widespread illness, intensified attention to environmental conditions. Streets were cleared more frequently, gatherings were limited, and activities believed to generate foul air were temporarily restricted. Although the underlying medical theories were incomplete, these responses demonstrate a clear link in the public mind between surroundings and survival. Even after immediate danger passed, some heightened practices persisted, gradually raising baseline expectations for cleanliness. Communication methods evolved to support these shifts. Written ordinances became more detailed, specifying distances between wells and waste pits or defining penalties with greater precision. Posting such notices in marketplaces or near gates ensured that travelers and newcomers encountered local standards quickly. The visibility of rules reduced ambiguity and made enforcement appear less arbitrary, which in turn encouraged broader compliance. Urban expansion tested older arrangements. As suburbs formed beyond original walls, new wells, roads, and disposal areas had to be integrated with existing routines. Sometimes this led to conflicts between long-standing residents and newer communities over where waste should be directed or who bore responsibility for maintenance. Negotiation produced revised boundaries and shared agreements, illustrating that sanitation systems were not static but continually renegotiated as cities changed shape. Environmental awareness, though expressed in pre-modern terms, remained grounded in observation. Residents learned which winds carried odors away from living quarters, which low points collected stagnant water, and which seasons demanded quicker removal of organic matter. These local insights guided decisions about where to place trades, how to orient buildings, and when to schedule intensive cleaning. Knowledge was practical, place-specific, and refined through experience rather than formal theory. Over the centuries, this accumulation of modest adjustments created urban settings that could absorb shocks without losing basic function. A blocked channel might inconvenience a district for a day, but alternative paths or manual clearing restored flow. A contaminated well prompted temporary reliance on another source while repairs were made. Redundancy, multiple small options rather than a single critical system, was a defining strength of medieval sanitation. By the threshold of the early modern period, many European towns possessed a layered inheritance of habits, rules, and physical features devoted to managing water and waste. None matched the efficiency of later engineered networks, yet together they formed a dependable framework that supported commerce, governance, and daily domestic life. The endurance of these cities was not the result of a single innovation, but of sustained attention to the unremarkable tasks that kept shared spaces usable. Seen from this perspective, medieval urban sanitation appears less as a prelude to modern solutions and more as a long tradition of practical stewardship. Communities worked within tight constraints, learning through repetition which measures preserved health, movement, and trust. Their achievements were quiet and often invisible, but they established the expectation, still present today, that a functioning city is one where the management of water, waste, and public space is continuous, organized, and collectively upheld. As this tradition of practical stewardship continued, it gradually influenced how later generations approached the idea of improvement itself. Change in medieval towns rarely arrived as a sweeping redesign. Instead, it appeared as a series of careful adjustments layered onto familiar routines. When a drain proved reliable, it was extended rather than replaced. When a well remained clean across several seasons, similar protections were applied to others. Progress was measured less by novelty and more by whether daily life became slightly more predictable. This cautious approach reflected the risks associated with experimentation in dense environments. A poorly placed dumping ground could contaminate water for an entire district. An obstructed channel might flood workshops or storage rooms. Because the consequences of failure were immediate, communities favored solutions that could be tested in small increments. If a change worked, it spread gradually through imitation. If it failed, it could be abandoned without destabilizing the entire system. Memory played an essential role in guiding these decisions. Older residents, craftsmen, and officials carried knowledge of past floods, harsh winters, or previous outbreaks of illness. Their recollections informed where new pits should be dug, which streets required priority clearing, and which water sources were safest during drought. In the absence of formal archives accessible to everyone, lived experience acted as a practical record of environmental risk. The physical texture of the city also preserved this memory. Worn paths where water habitually flowed, stone edges smoothed by repeated cleaning, and long-used routes for waste carts all marked patterns established over decades. Newcomers could often learn the logic of local sanitation simply by observing how space had been shaped by repeated use. Infrastructure was therefore both functional and instructional, guiding behavior without written explanation. Trade guilds continued to refine their internal standards as well. Workshops that depended on clean conditions, such as those handling food or textiles, developed stricter routines for disposing of byproducts. These practices were partly economic, protecting the quality of goods, but they also reduced friction with neighboring households. Where one craft generated strong odors or residue, adjustments were negotiated to prevent disputes that might disrupt business. Public celebrations and seasonal fairs provided recurring tests of urban capacity. Temporary surges in population increased strain on wells, streets, and disposal areas. Cities that managed these periods successfully often did so by expanding existing routines rather than inventing entirely new ones. Additional workers were hired, collection times were extended, and temporary barriers directed foot traffic away from vulnerable areas. Once crowds dispersed, the system returned to its usual rhythm, slightly informed by what had been learned. Environmental features beyond the walls remained closely tied to urban sanitation. Meadows, fields, and low-lying grounds served as receiving areas for materials that could not remain inside dense districts. Their placement was rarely accidental. Prevailing winds, slope, and distance from main roads influenced where such zones were established. Maintaining these external spaces required cooperation with surrounding rural communities, reinforcing the interdependence between town and countryside. Water management, in particular, encouraged long-term thinking. Wells that became unreliable forced costly adjustments, so efforts were made to protect them through coverings, raised edges, or controlled access. In some towns, shared responsibility for key water sources created informal hierarchies of care, where certain households or institutions oversaw maintenance in exchange for status or reduced fees. This arrangement linked environmental stewardship with social position. Gradually, written record-keeping expanded. Account books noted payments to cleaners, repairs to drains, or purchases of tools used in maintenance. While not technical manuals, these entries created a traceable history of what had been attempted and what required repeated attention. Over years, patterns in expenses revealed which parts of the system were most fragile, guiding future investment toward reinforcement rather than expansion alone. Perception from outsiders continued to matter. Travelers, pilgrims, and merchants compared conditions across regions, sharing impressions that influenced where routes shifted or lingered. A town known for tolerable lodging and passable streets gained advantages that extended beyond comfort. Reliability reduced delays, protected cargo, and encouraged return visits. In this way, sanitation quietly supported the broader reputation on which long-distance exchange depended. By sustaining these layered practices, medieval cities cultivated a form of stability rooted in maintenance rather than spectacle. Their streets, wells, and disposal routes were rarely celebrated in chronicles, yet they underpinned every visible achievement, from busy markets to functioning courts. The success of urban life depended on systems that were designed to be repeated, repaired, and adjusted without constant reinvention. When later centuries introduced more advanced engineering, these older habits did not disappear. Instead, they provided the administrative and cultural foundation upon which larger networks could be organized. Expectations that waste must be removed regularly, that water sources required protection, and that shared spaces demanded shared effort were already deeply embedded. New technologies expanded capacity, but the logic of continuous care had been established long before. Seen across this extended timeline, medieval sanitation appears as an evolving practice shaped by caution, memory, and cooperation. Communities worked within narrow margins, refining small solutions until they became dependable. Through repetition and gradual adaptation, they created urban environments capable of supporting dense populations despite limited tools. Their legacy is less visible than later pipes and tunnels, Yet it endures in the enduring principle that a city remains livable only when the ordinary work of maintenance is never allowed to lapse. As these expectations settled into everyday life, they also influenced how medieval people understood responsibility across generations. A functioning street or reliable well was rarely seen as the achievement of a single moment. Instead, it was understood as something inherited, cared for, and then passed forward. This sense of continuity encouraged decisions that favored durability over convenience. Even modest repairs were often made with the assumption that the same structure would still be in use many years later. This long view shaped attitudes toward materials and placement. When stones were set to line a drain or reinforce the edge of a well, the effort involved in moving and shaping them discouraged frequent relocation. As a result, once a practical configuration proved effective, it tended to remain in place. Over decades, these fixed points created a stable framework around which other parts of the city adapted. Streets curved where drainage already worked, and buildings aligned with established paths of water flow. Shared memory reinforced this stability. Stories about past floods, contaminated wells, or seasons of unusual illness circulated within families and workshops. These accounts were not formal histories, yet they carried practical warnings. By remembering where problems had previously occurred, residents avoided repeating earlier mistakes. In this way, narrative itself became a tool of environmental management, preserving lessons that might otherwise have been lost. The rhythm of maintenance also became intertwined with the broader calendar of urban life. Just as markets followed weekly cycles and religious observances marked the year, certain cleaning or clearing tasks were expected at predictable intervals. Before major festivals, central spaces were often prepared more carefully. After harsh weather, inspections ensured that channels remained open. These recurring moments of attention prevented small issues from quietly expanding into larger disruptions. Economic planning reflected similar caution. Town councils and local authorities sometimes set aside funds specifically for repairs to wells, gutters, or waste routes. Even when resources were limited, reserving a portion for upkeep acknowledged that neglect would prove more costly over time. This recognition that prevention was cheaper than recovery did not rely on modern accounting methods, but it emerged from repeated experience with the consequences of delay. Craft knowledge continued to deepen through repetition. Workers who cleared drains or maintained pits developed a tactile understanding of materials, how packed earth behaved after heavy rain, how wooden linings warped with moisture, how stone joints loosened under constant flow. Such knowledge rarely appeared in written form, yet it allowed experienced laborers to anticipate failures before they became visible. Their judgment helped cities intervene early, when repairs were still manageable. Urban soundscapes supported coordination as well. The familiar sequence of bells marking work hours, closures, or warnings created a shared temporal structure. When signals indicated that certain streets should be cleared for carts or that disposal periods had begun, residents adjusted without needing direct instruction. Over time, these cues reduced confusion and allowed unpleasant but necessary tasks to occur with minimal conflict. Interactions between neighboring districts encouraged gradual standardization. If one quarter of a town adopted a more effective way to keep gutters clear, others often followed after observing the benefits. This diffusion did not require central mandates. Practical success was persuasive on its own. Incremental imitation spread workable solutions across the urban landscape, producing a patchwork that slowly became more consistent. Natural features continued to guide decisions. Slight changes in elevation determined where water collected and where it dispersed. Communities learned to read these subtle variations, placing storage areas or sensitive activities on higher ground while directing runoff toward lower channels. Respecting the terrain reduced the effort required to manage waste and helped systems function with fewer interventions. Over long periods, the cumulative result of these choices was a city shaped as much by maintenance as by construction. Many visible landmarks, squares, bridges, main streets, depended on less visible routines that kept them usable. When those routines faltered, even impressive structures quickly lost their usefulness. This dependency reinforced the understanding that grandeur alone could not sustain urban life without continuous care. By sustaining attention to these ordinary processes, medieval towns created environments where predictability became a form of security. Residents could plan trade, travel, and daily chores with reasonable confidence that streets would remain passable and water sources serviceable. Such reliability did not eliminate hardship, but it reduced uncertainty enough for complex social and economic activity to persist. As centuries progressed and new technologies slowly appeared, these deeply rooted habits shaped how innovations were received. Communities evaluated unfamiliar methods through the lens of existing practice, asking whether a new channel, cover, or storage design improved the routines they already trusted. Adoption was therefore gradual, filtered through experience rather than enthusiasm for novelty. In this extended perspective, medieval sanitation emerges not as a primitive prelude to modern systems, but as a sustained exercise in collective discipline. Through repetition, shared memory, and careful adaptation to local conditions, urban populations preserved the usability of crowded spaces across generations. Their success rested on the quiet recognition that a city endures not because problems disappear, but because its inhabitants continue, day after day, to manage them before they grow beyond control. Over time, this steady discipline began to influence how space within the city was valued and interpreted. Areas that remained consistently dry, well-drained, and free from persistent odor gradually became preferred locations for trade, administration, and residence. Conversely, sections where water pooled or refuse accumulated were associated with inconvenience and risk. Without formal zoning in the modern sense, patterns of desirability still emerged, guided largely by the reliability of local sanitation conditions. These patterns affected investment decisions made by households and guilds. When a street proved dependable, its gutters functioning, its well remaining clean, property there attracted crafts that required stable environments, such as food preparation or textile work. As more activity concentrated in such places, the incentive to maintain their condition increased further. Cleanliness, in this way, reinforced itself through economic advantage rather than through abstract ideals. Boundaries between public and private responsibility also became more clearly understood. While households managed the immediate frontage of their dwellings, broader routes used by carts and animals demanded coordinated effort. This distinction encouraged a layered sense of duty. Individuals cared for what was directly outside their doors, while the community addressed corridors that served everyone. The overlap between these spheres required negotiation, but it also prevented the entire burden from falling on any single group. Tools used in maintenance evolved alongside these expectations. Simple wooden scrapers, brooms made from bundled reeds, and carts designed to carry sealed barrels were refined through use. Small improvements, stronger handles, tighter lids, more balanced wheels, reduced spillage and made repetitive work slightly more efficient. Although modest, these refinements accumulated, allowing the same number of workers to manage larger volumes as towns expanded. Observation remained the primary method for judging success. Clear water, smoother passage for carts, and reduced insect presence signaled that routines were working. When these indicators shifted, attention followed quickly. Because feedback was immediate and visible, adjustments could be made before conditions deteriorated severely. This responsiveness was one of the quiet strengths of systems that operated in open view rather than behind hidden infrastructure. Interactions with surrounding landscapes continued to shape urban choices. Forests supplied timber for channel covers and well frames, while nearby clay deposits allowed the creation of sealed containers and linings. Where such resources were scarce, cities adapted by reusing materials from damaged buildings or repurposing shipping crates. Resourcefulness reduced dependence on distant supply and ensured that essential maintenance could proceed even during periods of disrupted trade. Travel within the city itself provided constant informal inspection. Merchants, messengers, and laborers moved along the same routes daily, noticing obstructions or unusual conditions. Their reports shared in workshops, markets, or taverns functioned as an early warning network. Problems rarely remained hidden for long because so many eyes encountered the same spaces repeatedly. Information spread through conversation faster than any formal notice could. Seasonal labor patterns also influenced sanitation. During harvest periods, some workers left the city to assist in nearby fields, temporarily reducing the workforce available for maintenance. Anticipating this, certain towns scheduled additional clearing beforehand or simplified routines until full labor returned. Planning around predictable absences helped prevent small issues from compounding during times of reduced capacity. As urban populations diversified, differences in custom required ongoing accommodation. New residents brought habits from other regions, alternative ways of storing refuse, different expectations about animal presence, or varied approaches to water use. Through a mixture of example, persuasion, and regulation, cities gradually aligned these practices with local norms. This slow harmonization allowed growth without abandoning established systems that had proven reliable. Over decades, repeated cooperation fostered a practical trust among residents. People came to assume that others would fulfill their part, clearing a frontage, observing disposal times, reporting a blocked drain, because most had experienced the consequences when such duties were ignored. Trust reduced the need for constant enforcement and made collective action faster when unexpected problems arose. Physical traces of these long habits became embedded in the urban fabric. Slightly raised thresholds prevented runoff from entering homes. Stones placed at corners protected walls from cartwheels while guiding water toward channels. Even the width of certain streets reflected a balance between space for movement and the need to keep drainage effective. These features were not decorative. They were records of accumulated practical decisions. By the closing centuries of the medieval era, many towns functioned through this dense web of shared expectations, simple technologies, and observed feedback. Their sanitation systems remained visible, labor-intensive, and imperfect, yet they provided enough stability for commerce, governance, and domestic life to continue without constant crisis. The achievement was not the elimination of waste or disease, but the creation of routines that kept both within manageable limits. Viewed across this long arc, the endurance of medieval cities appears rooted in an ongoing conversation between people and place. Streets, wells, and disposal grounds were adjusted in response to experience, then readjusted as conditions changed. This continuous process, quiet, repetitive, and rarely recorded in detail, formed the practical foundation upon which later urban innovations would build, ensuring that when new technologies finally arrived, they entered communities already accustomed to the discipline of caring for shared space. As later generations inherited these carefully adjusted environments, They also inherited a set of expectations about how problems should be approached. Difficulties with water, refuse, or crowded streets were rarely seen as isolated incidents. Instead, they were treated as signals that some part of the routine required attention. This mindset encouraged responses that focused first on restoration, returning conditions to their familiar, workable state, before considering more ambitious alterations. Restoration depended on continuity of knowledge. Older craftsmen, wardens, and household heads carried practical understanding of where channels tended to clog, which wells were most vulnerable after heavy rain, and which routes waste carts could navigate without obstruction. When younger residents learned these details through observation and participation, the city retained an operational memory that did not rely on written plans. The landscape itself, marked by worn paths and established drainage lines, acted as a guide for those who paid attention. This continuity also shaped how communities evaluated risk. Certain corners, low stretches of road, or enclosed courtyards became known as places that required closer watching during particular seasons. Awareness did not eliminate hazards, but it allowed residents to anticipate them. Sand or straw might be spread where footing became uncertain, and temporary barriers could redirect foot traffic away from vulnerable ground. Small, anticipatory measures often prevented minor issues from escalating into wider disruption. Economic life reinforced the value of such foresight. Workshops depended on predictable access to customers and suppliers, and any obstruction, whether from pooled water or accumulated debris, translated into lost time. Craftsmen therefore had practical reasons to support maintenance beyond simple compliance with rules. When shared routes remained clear, the entire chain of exchange, from raw materials to finished goods, moved with fewer interruptions. Public gathering spaces illustrated the same principle. Squares used for announcements, trade, and civic meetings required consistent upkeep to remain functional. Their centrality meant that neglect was immediately visible, creating pressure for timely cleaning. When these areas were kept orderly, they reinforced confidence that the city as a whole was being managed with care. Disorder in such prominent locations, by contrast, quickly undermined trust in local authority. Natural cycles continued to influence how effort was distributed. Periods of extended rain demanded attention to flowing water, while dry spells increased concern about stagnant pools and dust. Communities adjusted by shifting labor toward the most pressing conditions of the moment. Because these adjustments were expected rather than exceptional, they could be made without elaborate coordination. Experience had already established which responses were effective. The exchange between town and countryside remained essential. Surrounding fields absorbed materials that could not remain within dense neighborhoods, while rural producers relied on urban markets. Maintaining passable roads and clean entry points benefited both sides. If waste accumulated near gates or along approach routes, trade slowed and relations strained. Shared interest in reliable movement encouraged cooperation across these boundaries. Over time, repeated collaboration fostered a practical sense of stewardship that extended beyond immediate necessity. Residents recognized that neglecting routine care did not merely create discomfort in the present. It imposed additional burdens later. Clearing a channel before it fully blocked required less effort than reopening it after flooding. This awareness, earned through repeated experience, made preventative action feel rational rather than burdensome. Visual order also carried symbolic weight. Straightened paths, swept thresholds, and covered pits signaled that a community remained attentive to its surroundings. Visitors interpreted these signs as evidence of stability, even if underlying conditions were still imperfect. The appearance of care helped sustain confidence among merchants, travelers, and potential settlers, reinforcing the city's standing within regional networks. As written administration slowly expanded in some towns, records began to capture recurring expenses for repairs and cleaning. Though brief, these entries revealed patterns, locations that demanded frequent attention or materials that failed quickly. Such information guided future choices, encouraging investment in more durable solutions where repeated costs had proven higher than initial improvement. Incremental planning emerged from accumulated observation rather than abstract theory. Throughout these developments, the essential character of medieval sanitation remained grounded in visibility and participation. Most processes unfolded in shared space, where success or failure could be judged by anyone passing through. This openness created a feedback system in which residents, workers, and officials all contributed to maintaining workable conditions. Responsibility was distributed, sometimes unevenly, but rarely absent. By sustaining these habits across generations, cities achieved a form of resilience that did not depend on complex machinery. When disruptions occurred, storms, fires, sudden influxes of people, the response drew upon familiar routines. Clear the routes, protect the water, move refuse outward, restore circulation. Because these steps were widely understood, recovery could begin quickly, even with limited resources. In this extended view, the endurance of medieval urban life rests on a quiet partnership between memory, environment, and repeated action. The systems that managed waste, water, and shared space were never flawless, yet they were sufficiently dependable to support dense communities over long periods. Their legacy lies not only in physical remnants, but in the enduring principle that a livable city is sustained through continuous, collective attention to the ordinary conditions that make daily life possible. As this collective attention persisted, it gradually shaped expectations about fairness as well as function. Residents judged the health of their community not only by whether streets were passable or wells remained usable, but also by whether responsibilities were shared in a way that felt balanced. If one household repeatedly neglected its frontage or a particular trade left excessive residue without remedy, tension followed. Addressing such imbalances became part of maintaining order, because resentment could undermine cooperation just as surely as blocked drains. Local authorities, where they were effective, tried to mediate these pressures by clarifying duties. Notices might specify which stretches of road fell under household care and which required organized crews. Even when enforcement was uneven, the presence of stated expectations reduced disputes by providing a common reference. In practice, many conflicts were settled informally through negotiation, with neighbors agreeing on schedules or exchanging small favors to keep shared areas usable. The pace of daily life also influenced how sanitation tasks were distributed. Early morning, before markets reached their busiest hours, offered a window when sweeping or cart movement caused minimal disruption. Late evening allowed the removal of heavier refuse when foot traffic had thinned. By aligning unpleasant work with quieter periods, cities preserved the flow of commerce while still addressing necessary maintenance. Over time, these temporal patterns became so familiar that they required little instruction. Craft districts illustrate how specialization could both concentrate problems and improve solutions. Areas devoted to dyeing, tanning, or metalwork generated distinctive byproducts that demanded specific handling. Because similar workshops clustered together, workers shared practical techniques, where to channel runoff, how to store scrap safely, and when to schedule removal. Concentration allowed experience to accumulate quickly, turning localized challenges into manageable routines rather than persistent hazards spread across the city. Public wells remained among the most sensitive points in the urban landscape. Their reliability depended on careful behavior within a small radius. Spilled waste, animal presence, or careless washing could affect many households at once. For that reason, communities often treated the space around a well with heightened attention. Simple boundaries, raised edges, or designated drawing areas reduced contamination. The well became not just a water source, but a focal symbol of shared dependence. Weather events continued to test these arrangements. After heavy storms, residents expected to see immediate efforts to clear debris from channels and reopen blocked paths. Visible response mattered as much as technical success, because it reassured the population that disruption was temporary. When action followed quickly, confidence in the system endured even if conditions had briefly worsened. Travelers' impressions reinforced the value of such responsiveness. Accounts that described a town as orderly or tolerable often mentioned practical details. Streets that could be navigated without difficulty. Markets that did not linger in disorder after closing. Water that appeared clean enough for daily use. These observations circulated along trade routes, subtly influencing where caravans paused or ships docked. Reputation, once established, could attract further investment that made continued maintenance easier to fund. As towns expanded beyond older boundaries, integrating new neighborhoods required extending established habits rather than abandoning them. Fresh wells were protected using familiar methods, and new roads were aligned to connect with existing drainage patterns. This continuity reduced confusion and helped newcomers adopt the same expectations that governed older districts. Expansion succeeded when it felt like a natural extension of what residents already understood. Materials reused from damaged structures also contributed to sanitation infrastructure. Stones from collapsed walls might line a troublesome gutter, and timber from dismantled buildings could reinforce pit covers or cart frames. Reuse conserved resources while preserving continuity, since familiar materials behaved in known ways under local conditions. The city, in effect, repaired itself using parts of its own past. Communication remained largely interpersonal. News of a blocked channel or a fouled well spread through conversation at markets, workshops, and places of worship. Because many residents followed similar daily routes, information traveled quickly without formal systems. This informal network ensured that problems rarely remained isolated. Awareness prompted assistance, complaint, or official attention within a short time. Over many decades, these intertwined practices produced a stable rhythm that residents could anticipate. Streets would be cleared after busy trading days, wells inspected following storms, and disposal routes maintained before major gatherings. Predictability reduced anxiety in dense environments where small failures could otherwise cascade. People planned their work and movement with the assumption that shared spaces would remain broadly functional. In the broader historical arc, such reliability proved more significant than any single technical improvement. Medieval cities endured because they cultivated habits that kept essential systems within workable limits. Their methods were visible, laborious, and sometimes fragile, yet they were sustained by a widespread understanding that neglect carried immediate costs for everyone. By the time later innovations in engineering began to appear, these communities already possessed a cultural framework that valued regular upkeep, clear responsibility, and rapid response to environmental change. New conduits, covered drains, and eventually more complex networks were accepted not as entirely foreign ideas, but as extensions of long familiar goals. The enduring lesson of medieval urban sanitation, therefore, lies in the recognition that technology alone does not secure cleanliness or health. It is the steady cooperation of ordinary people, repeated across generations, that keeps shared spaces livable. As these cooperative habits matured, they also influenced how communities responded to moments when trust briefly faltered. Periods of scarcity, political tension, or sudden population pressure could strain the willingness of residents to fulfill shared duties. When this happened, the first signs often appeared in the condition of common spaces. Gutters left uncleared, refuse lingering longer than usual, or wells surrounded by disorder. Such visible changes acted as early warnings that social cohesion, not just sanitation, required attention. Local leaders understood that restoring order in the environment could help restore confidence among residents. Organizing a coordinated cleanup after disruption served both practical and symbolic purposes. It reopened routes for trade and movement, while also demonstrating that collective action was still possible. Even modest efforts, repairing a damaged channel or reestablishing a regular disposal schedule, signaled that the routines holding the city together had not been abandoned. These moments revealed how closely physical maintenance and social stability were intertwined. When people saw neighbors contributing labor or resources, reluctance often softened. Participation encouraged further participation, creating a reinforcing cycle similar to the one that had sustained ordinary upkeep during calmer periods. Conversely, visible neglect could spread just as quickly, which is why early intervention mattered. Apprenticeship systems played a quiet role in preserving continuity through such fluctuations. Younger workers learned not only technical skills, how to line a pit or clear a drain, but also the expectations surrounding reliability. Being known as someone who completed unpleasant tasks without complaint carried practical advantages, including steady employment and trust from guild leaders or householders. Reputation, built through consistent service, became a form of currency within the maintenance economy. Urban design gradually incorporated lessons drawn from repeated disruptions. Where flooding had once carried debris into central streets, small embankments or redirected channels reduced future risk. Where carts frequently damaged corners or walls, protective stones were set in place. Each addition was modest, yet together they formed a landscape shaped by remembered problems and tested solutions. The city's layout became a record of past adjustments. Public rituals sometimes reinforced these improvements. Before major religious observances or civic ceremonies, coordinated cleaning of principal routes ensured that processions could pass without obstruction. While the immediate goal was ceremonial order, the preparation also cleared accumulated waste and repaired minor damage. Regular repetition of such events created dependable intervals for thorough maintenance that might otherwise have been postponed. The relationship between visibility and accountability remained central. Because many sanitation activities occurred in shared view, success or failure could not easily be hidden. A blocked gutter or fouled well drew immediate attention, prompting questions about responsibility. This transparency reduced the distance between cause and consequence. Those who neglected duties faced not only fines but also the erosion of standing within their neighborhood. Environmental knowledge continued to deepen through observation of subtle patterns. Residents noted how certain winds dispersed odors, how shade slowed evaporation, or how particular soils absorbed runoff more effectively. These insights influenced where temporary storage was placed and how frequently specific areas required attention. Practical understanding of microenvironments allowed limited labor to be directed where it mattered most. Trade connections carried these lessons beyond individual towns. Merchants and craftsmen traveling between regions compared methods they had seen elsewhere. Different ways of covering drains, alternative cart designs, or varied schedules for removal. Useful ideas spread gradually, adapted to local materials and customs. In this manner, medieval sanitation evolved through a quiet exchange of experience rather than through centralized planning. As cities approached the transition into the early modern period, their accumulated practices formed a resilient framework capable of absorbing incremental technological change. When more durable linings, improved tools, or better organized crews became available, they were integrated into routines that residents already understood. Innovation succeeded because it aligned with established habits of regular care and shared oversight. Looking across these centuries, the persistence of medieval urban life appears grounded in a disciplined attention to ordinary conditions. Waste was moved before it overwhelmed, water sources were guarded before they failed, and shared routes were restored before commerce stalled. None of these actions eliminated hardship, yet together they maintained a workable balance that allowed dense communities to function. The legacy of this long effort is not only found in surviving street patterns or historic wells, but in the enduring expectation that cities require continuous stewardship. Medieval towns demonstrated that even with limited knowledge and simple tools, consistent cooperation could sustain complex urban environments. Their experience suggests that the stability of any city, past or present, depends less on dramatic interventions than on the steady, repeated commitment to keep common spaces clean, accessible, and dependable for those who rely on them each day. Over extended periods, this steady commitment also influenced how communities interpreted success. Medieval towns rarely measured achievement through sudden transformation. Instead, success was recognized when daily life proceeded without interruption. When carts moved on schedule, water could be drawn without concern, and markets closed without leaving lasting disorder behind. Stability itself became the desired outcome, and sanitation was one of the quiet mechanisms that made such stability visible. This preference for continuity shaped decision-making during times of opportunity as well as crisis. When additional revenue arrived through prosperous trade or favorable harvests, some cities invested in reinforcing the systems that already supported routine life. Wells were deepened, vulnerable stretches of road received better drainage, and storage areas were repositioned to reduce congestion. These choices may have appeared modest compared with building new monuments, yet they protected the foundations on which everyday activity depended. Civic pride gradually attached itself to these dependable conditions. Residents spoke of certain streets as reliable passages in all seasons, or of particular wells known for steady quality. Such reputations were sustained not by a single repair but by years of attentive upkeep. Pride, in turn, encouraged further care, because neglect would have been immediately noticeable against a backdrop of established order. Household routines mirrored this broader pattern. Tasks like sweeping thresholds, managing small waste containers, or keeping access paths clear were woven into the rhythm of morning and evening. These actions required little deliberation because they had become customary. When multiplied across hundreds of dwellings, small private efforts reduced the burden on shared crews and kept accumulation within manageable limits. The design of tools continued to evolve through incremental refinement. Handles were shaped to reduce strain, lids were tightened to prevent spillage, and wheels were adjusted for uneven cobblestones. None of these improvements changed the nature of the work, yet they extended endurance and lowered the chance of accidents. Over time, better tools meant that fewer disruptions occurred during transport or removal, preserving the predictability that cities valued. Observation of cause and effect remained central to improvement. If a newly lined channel stayed clear through several storms, similar linings were added elsewhere. If a storage pit repeatedly produced odor despite attention, its placement or depth was reconsidered. This practical experimentation relied on patience rather than theory, allowing communities to refine methods without risking widespread failure. Shared spaces such as bridges, gates, and central crossings received particular attention because they concentrated movement. Keeping these points clear ensured that goods and people could circulate even when peripheral streets faced temporary difficulty. In this sense, sanitation strategy included prioritization. Certain routes were maintained first because their obstruction would ripple across the entire urban network. Interactions with neighboring towns reinforced standards through comparison. Carters and traders who experienced smoother passage or cleaner staging areas in one location carried those impressions elsewhere. Cities that wished to remain competitive adopted practices that reduced delay and discomfort. Gradually, a loose regional expectation formed around what constituted an orderly environment, encouraging convergence without formal coordination. Natural features continued to guide long-term choices. Slight elevations were favored for new wells, while low-lying pockets were reserved for uses less sensitive to moisture. Planting along certain edges helped stabilize soil and absorb runoff. These decisions show a growing sensitivity to how landscape could assist maintenance rather than resist it, reducing the amount of labor required to achieve the same result. During periods of rebuilding after fire or structural collapse, opportunities arose to correct earlier weaknesses. Narrow passages that trapped debris might be widened slightly, and poorly sloped surfaces could be regraded. Reconstruction rarely aimed for perfection, but it incorporated lessons learned from previous inconvenience. Each cycle of damage and repair nudged the city toward arrangements that demanded less constant intervention. Communication practices also matured. Regular announcements about clearing schedules or restricted areas reduced uncertainty and helped residents coordinate their own routines. When expectations were clear, compliance required less enforcement. People adjusted habits, timing deliveries, choosing routes, or storing materials, so that essential maintenance could proceed without conflict. Across generations, these layered adjustments produced an environment where resilience depended on familiarity. Residents knew how the city behaved in rain, heat, or cold, and which responses restored normal conditions fastest. Because knowledge was widely shared, recovery from disruption did not hinge on a single expert. Collective memory functioned as a distributed guide, enabling many hands to act in concert. In the broader historical perspective, medieval sanitation reveals a culture oriented toward preservation of function. The goal was not to eliminate every source of discomfort, but to prevent small problems from accumulating into systemic failure. Through repetition, observation, and cooperation, towns maintained a workable equilibrium that supported trade, governance, and domestic life. This equilibrium laid the groundwork for later centuries, when more advanced engineering could extend capacity without replacing the underlying habits that made systems reliable. The enduring lesson is that infrastructure succeeds when it is matched by consistent human practice. Medieval communities, working with limited tools, demonstrated that steady attention to ordinary tasks can sustain complex urban life over remarkably long periods. As this equilibrium persisted, it gradually influenced how future improvements were judged by the people who lived within these towns. Innovations were rarely embraced simply because they were new. Instead, they were evaluated according to whether they reduced uncertainty in daily routines. A modification that kept a street passable after heavy rain, or that prevented a well from becoming unreliable during dry months, gained acceptance because it preserved the continuity residents depended upon. Practical results mattered more than novelty. This cautious acceptance shaped the tempo of urban change. Rather than replacing existing arrangements, communities often layered new measures onto familiar structures. A previously open channel might receive a partial cover. A frequently used dumping path could be shifted slightly farther from homes while keeping its route recognizable. By preserving what already worked, cities avoided the confusion that abrupt transformation might cause in densely populated environments. Generational turnover did not erase these patterns because they were embedded in daily behavior. Children observed adults clearing thresholds, respecting designated disposal times, and avoiding sensitive water sources. Through repetition, these actions became part of ordinary conduct long before their broader purpose was fully understood. When those children later assumed responsibility for households or workshops, they continued the same routines with minimal instruction. Seasonal markets and traveling fairs offered recurring opportunities to test whether established systems could handle temporary strain. Increased foot traffic, extra animals, and larger volumes of refuse challenged the capacity of wells and streets. Successful towns responded by extending familiar practices, adding more collection runs, assigning additional watchers to key routes, and preparing storage areas in advance. After the crowds dispersed, the city returned to its usual rhythm, now informed by what had proven effective under pressure. The relationship between sound and coordination remained important. Bells signaling the close of trade or the start of curfew also created windows when maintenance could proceed with fewer obstacles. Residents learned to associate these sounds not only with timekeeping but with the sequence of tasks that kept shared spaces functional. This predictable structure reduced conflict, since unpleasant work occurred when most people expected it. Material durability continued to guide investment. Where earlier wooden linings had required frequent replacement, some towns gradually substituted stone or fired clay when resources allowed. The shift was incremental, often beginning in the most troublesome locations. As longer-lasting materials proved their value by reducing repeated labor, their use expanded. Even so, older elements were rarely discarded outright. They remained in service where conditions were less demanding. Environmental cues still served as primary indicators of system health. Clear runoff after a storm, the absence of persistent odor near storage areas, and the steady draw of water from shared wells signaled that routines were holding. When any of these signs changed, attention followed quickly. Because feedback was immediate and visible, corrective action could be taken before disruption spread across multiple districts. Trade corridors reinforced the importance of dependable conditions at entry points. Gates, bridges, and roadside staging areas were kept as clear as possible to prevent delays that might divert merchants elsewhere. A town that maintained smooth passage gained a reputation for efficiency, encouraging repeat visits and strengthening its economic position. Sanitation at these thresholds was therefore both a practical necessity and a strategic choice. Written administration, where it expanded, increasingly reflected the cost of neglect. Account entries showing repeated repairs to the same location highlighted weaknesses that warranted stronger solutions. Over time, such records guided more deliberate allocation of resources, favoring preventative reinforcement over continual patching. Even without modern engineering plans, a pattern of informed decision-making emerged from accumulated experience. Neighborhood cooperation remained essential because many problems crossed property lines. Water flowing from one courtyard could affect the next, and debris left at a corner could block an entire route. Regular communication, through conversation, shared labor days, or mutual agreements, helped align individual actions with collective needs. Trust, once established, allowed residents to rely on one another without constant oversight. As cities edged toward the early modern era, Their sanitation practices formed a stable platform for gradual technological enhancement. Covered drains extended existing channels, improved carts reduced spillage, and more organized crews increased consistency. None of these changes replaced the underlying habits that had sustained urban life. They amplified them. The expectation of routine care remained the constant around which new tools were arranged. Across this long span, the defining characteristic of medieval urban sanitation was persistence. Communities accepted that waste, water, and crowding would always present challenges. Rather than seeking permanent solutions, they maintained systems designed to be revisited, repaired, and adjusted. This mindset transformed maintenance from a temporary response into a continuous civic practice. In the end, the endurance of these towns rested on a shared understanding that livable space depends on attention paid day after day. Streets stayed usable because someone cleared them again and again. Wells remained trusted because generations protected them in familiar ways. Through steady repetition, quiet, often unnoticed, yet rarely abandoned, medieval cities sustained the conditions that allowed dense human settlement to endure long before hidden pipes and modern networks made such stability easier to achieve. As these long-standing practices continued into later centuries, they also shaped how communities interpreted the passage of time within their own streets. Change was visible, but it appeared as a gentle layering rather than a sharp break. A channel that had once been a simple trench might now carry a stone lining. A well that began as an open shaft could stand beneath a modest cover. Residents who had grown up watching these gradual refinements understood improvement as something that accumulated quietly, without disturbing the familiar layout that guided daily movement. This sense of continuity reduced anxiety in crowded environments. When people recognized the routes, the drainage paths, and the customary places for disposal, they could navigate the city with confidence even as small adjustments appeared. Familiarity functioned as a stabilizing force. It allowed innovation to occur without creating confusion, because each new element was attached to something already understood. The physical wear of materials became a kind of shared record. Grooves worn by cartwheels, smooth stones near wells, and darkened timbers along frequently used storage areas all testified to repeated use. These marks were not seen as defects alone. They indicated reliability. A path that showed years of traffic was trusted to remain passable, and a well surrounded by worn steps suggested long service without failure. Durability, proven through time, carried persuasive authority. Urban routines also influenced how risk was distributed across the day. Tasks that generated the most disruption, moving heavy waste or clearing blocked gutters, were often scheduled when fewer people depended on those spaces. Early morning and late evening became periods when the city briefly shifted from commerce to maintenance. Because this pattern repeated regularly, residents planned around it, reducing friction between necessary labor and ordinary activity. Food supply chains reinforced the importance of predictable cleanliness. Markets handling meat, fish, grain, and produce required swift removal of spoiled remnants to prevent contamination of fresh goods. Vendors and customers alike benefited when these processes occurred reliably. The expectation that a market would be usable again the next day depended on consistent end-of-day clearing, turning sanitation into an essential partner of urban nourishment. In districts where space was limited, vertical solutions appeared. Storage platforms, raised containers, or hooks for suspending materials kept waste off the ground until collection. These modest adaptations reduced contact with foot traffic and helped preserve narrow passages. Over time, such features became standard in tightly built neighborhoods, showing how architecture adjusted to recurring environmental pressures. Communication through routine sounds remained effective even as towns grew. The sequence of bells or calls marking transitions in the day acted as a shared schedule for both commerce and upkeep. Residents did not need written reminders to know when certain activities would occur. This auditory structure allowed large groups to coordinate behavior with minimal instruction, sustaining order in spaces where formal oversight was limited. Environmental observation continued to guide placement of sensitive functions. Areas exposed to steady breezes were favored for temporary storage that might produce odor, while sheltered corners were reserved for uses less affected by airflow. Subtle knowledge of wind, shade, and slope, gathered through years of experience, helped reduce discomfort without requiring complex construction. The city adapted itself to the landscape as much as it reshaped it. As regional trade intensified, towns that maintained dependable conditions found it easier to integrate into wider networks. Caravans and river traffic preferred stops where loading areas were clear and water sources trustworthy. Reliability shortened delays, protected goods, and encouraged repeated visits. Over time, this steady preference rewarded communities that treated sanitation as a continuous priority rather than an occasional response. Generational teaching preserved these priorities. Younger residents learned which corners flooded after heavy rain, which wells were safest during dry spells, and which routes waste carts followed at night. This knowledge was absorbed through participation, helping with small tasks, observing elders, and hearing practical advice. By the time responsibility shifted to them, the logic of maintenance already felt natural. Written records, where they survived, show a growing awareness that repeated minor repairs could be reduced through targeted reinforcement. Investing extra effort once, strengthening a vulnerable lining or improving a troublesome slope, often saved many future interventions. This realization did not eliminate routine work, but it made that work more efficient, allowing limited resources to support expanding populations. Across these developments, the defining feature remained steadiness. Medieval cities did not eliminate the challenges of waste, water, or crowding. Instead, they cultivated habits that kept those challenges within tolerable bounds. Streets were cleared often enough, wells protected carefully enough, and disposal managed consistently enough to prevent frequent breakdown. In the broader arc of urban history, this steady management formed the quiet foundation upon which later, more complex systems could be built. When enclosed sewers, improved pumps, and larger administrative structures eventually appeared, they entered environments already shaped by centuries of routine care. The expectation that shared spaces required constant attention was firmly established. Seen from this perspective, the endurance of medieval towns was less a product of dramatic innovation than of disciplined repetition. Through familiar paths, trusted materials, and coordinated daily effort, communities preserved the usability of crowded spaces across generations. Their experience demonstrates that the longevity of any city, regardless of era, depends on the persistent, often unnoticed work that keeps water clean, movement possible, and common ground reliably maintained. As these practices carried forward, they also influenced how people within medieval towns understood the limits of their environment. There was a clear awareness that space inside walls or along established streets could not expand easily. Because expansion was constrained, maintaining what already existed became more valuable than seeking entirely new ground. Care for wells, drains, and shared routes was therefore tied to a practical understanding that replacement was difficult, while preservation was achievable through steady effort. This constraint encouraged efficient use of available areas. Courtyards were arranged so that runoff could be directed toward known channels, and storage spaces were positioned where they would not obstruct movement. Even small adjustments, shifting a barrel a few steps away from a busy corner or raising a platform above damp ground, helped prevent recurring problems. Over time, countless minor decisions like these created urban spaces that functioned with fewer interruptions despite their density. Memory of past disruptions remained an important guide. When older residents recalled a season in which a particular lane became impassable, later generations treated that location with greater caution. Additional clearing, stronger edging, or redirected foot traffic reduced the chance of repetition. These responses did not eliminate risk entirely, but they demonstrated how experience was converted into preventative habit rather than forgotten once immediate danger passed. The rhythm of deliveries also shaped sanitation routines. Goods entering the city, grain, timber, cloth, livestock, arrived at predictable times, and the byproducts of unpacking or processing needed swift removal. Coordinating cleanup with delivery schedules prevented congestion at gates and along main arteries. When movement remained smooth, merchants could complete transactions quickly, reinforcing the economic value of reliable environmental management. Shared tools and storage points appeared in some districts to simplify repetitive work. Instead of each household maintaining separate equipment, certain streets kept communal brooms, scrapers, or carts accessible to those responsible for upkeep. This arrangement reduced cost and ensured that essential tasks could proceed even if individual resources were limited. The presence of shared equipment also served as a visible reminder that maintenance was a collective responsibility. Light conditions influenced how effectively these tasks were performed. Narrow streets and overhanging structures created shadows that could conceal debris or standing water. Residents learned which times of day offered the best visibility for inspection and clearing. Midday light, when available, was often used to check problem areas, while evening hours were reserved for transport when traffic thinned. Aligning effort with natural illumination improved results without requiring additional technology. Animals continued to play a complex role within this system. While some consumed scraps that might otherwise accumulate, their movement could also scatter refuse or contaminate sensitive areas. Towns adjusted by restricting where animals could roam or by assigning specific routes for herding. Managing this balance required ongoing attention, since the benefits and risks shifted with population size and seasonal conditions. Edges of the city, near walls, ditches, or rivers, remained crucial transition zones. Materials moved outward through these boundaries, and their condition affected how easily waste could be removed from dense districts. Keeping approach paths stable prevented delays that might cause refuse to linger inside. These peripheral spaces, though less visible than central squares, were essential links in the overall chain of sanitation. Social expectations reinforced technical measures. Households that consistently maintained their surroundings gained reputations for reliability, which could translate into trust in trade or cooperation with neighbors. Conversely, repeated neglect carried social costs that extended beyond fines. Reputation functioned as an informal enforcement mechanism, encouraging adherence to routines even when direct supervision was minimal. Over time, the layering of small improvements created environments that were easier to manage with the same level of effort. A slightly better slope reduced the frequency of clearing. A sturdier cover prevented repeated contamination. A clearer schedule minimized confusion about responsibilities. None of these changes transformed the city at once, yet together they lowered the background level of disorder that residents had to confront each day. Travel between towns continued to spread practical ideas. A merchant who noticed an effective method for protecting a well or organizing a disposal route might describe it elsewhere, where local craftsmen adapted it to available materials. This slow exchange of experience produced gradual convergence in certain practices across regions, even without centralized direction. By sustaining attention to these details, medieval communities cultivated a durable equilibrium between crowding and livability. Their streets remained imperfect, their knowledge incomplete, yet their routines were strong enough to prevent frequent breakdown. The city functioned because problems were addressed while still small, before they could cascade into wider disruption. In the long view, this persistent care reveals a culture oriented toward stewardship rather than spectacle. The true achievement was not the construction of grand features, but the preservation of everyday usability: clean enough water, clear enough paths, manageable levels of waste. Through repetition, shared memory, and cooperative effort, medieval towns maintained the conditions required for dense social and economic life, demonstrating that continuity itself can be one of the most powerful forms of urban resilience. Over many years, this emphasis on stewardship began to influence how communities judged the success of their leaders as well. Authority was measured not only by the ability to defend walls or collect taxes, but by whether ordinary life remained orderly and dependable. When wells were kept serviceable, when main routes stayed clear enough for carts, and when refuse did not linger in crowded districts, residents experienced governance as something practical rather than distant. Stability in shared spaces became a quiet proof that local administration was functioning. This expectation encouraged officials to focus on continuity, instead of pursuing dramatic alterations that might disrupt familiar patterns. They often prioritized repairs that preserved existing routines. Replacing a damaged lining, reinforcing a frequently used crossing, or organizing additional clearing after a difficult season signaled attentiveness to everyday needs. These modest interventions rarely appeared in grand records, yet they sustained confidence that the city's basic systems would hold. The built environment itself reflected this preference for preservation. Stones that had shifted were reset rather than removed, and channels that still guided water effectively were extended instead of abandoned. By working with established structures, towns avoided the uncertainty that came with entirely new layouts. Residents could continue navigating by memory, trusting that known paths would remain usable even as small improvements accumulated. Patterns of cooperation also deepened through repeated shared effort. When neighbors participated together in clearing a troublesome stretch or protecting a vulnerable well, they built familiarity that made future coordination easier. The memory of successful collaboration reduced hesitation the next time a problem emerged. In this way, sanitation work quietly strengthened social ties, turning practical necessity into a source of mutual recognition. Seasonal preparation remained a consistent feature of this cycle. Before periods known for heavy rain or increased trade, attention shifted toward reinforcing the most sensitive points: low streets, busy intersections, and storage areas prone to overflow. Anticipating strain allowed cities to absorb pressure without sudden breakdown. Even when conditions proved harsher than expected, prior preparation shortened recovery time. Materials continued to be selected with durability in mind. Where earlier solutions had required frequent replacement, communities gradually favored options that endured longer under local weather and traffic. A sturdier edge along a gutter or a more secure cover over a pit reduced the number of interventions needed each year. Over decades, these choices lowered the cumulative labor required to maintain acceptable conditions. The sensory landscape still provided immediate feedback. Clearer air near market spaces after closing, the sound of water moving freely through a channel, or the absence of standing pools along a familiar route signaled that routines were effective. Because these signs were easy to perceive, they allowed residents to confirm success without formal inspection. When changes were noticed, an unusual smell or a sluggish flow, attention followed quickly. Connections between districts also encouraged shared standards. If one quarter maintained especially reliable conditions, neighboring areas often adopted similar habits to avoid being seen as neglected by comparison. Pride in local surroundings spread outward, creating a gradual leveling of expectations across the city. Improvement did not occur everywhere at once, but visible examples made better practices easier to accept. Trade and travel continued to reward such consistency. Merchants preferred routes where delays were unlikely, and visitors remembered towns where movement felt orderly. Over time, these preferences translated into tangible advantages: busier markets, steadier income, and stronger ties to regional networks. Sanitation, though rarely celebrated, contributed directly to these outcomes by preserving the flow of daily activity. Education through participation remained the primary method of transmission. Young residents learned by assisting with simple tasks, observing when and how spaces were cleared, and hearing practical explanations from elders. This experiential knowledge ensured that routines survived even when written records were scarce. The city's functioning was carried forward through habit as much as through instruction. As centuries passed, the accumulation of these modest, repeated efforts produced environments that were resilient despite limited technology. Disruptions still occurred: storms, fires, sudden influxes of people, but the response drew on well-practiced steps. Restore drainage, secure water, remove excess waste, reopen routes. Because these actions were widely understood, recovery did not depend on a single authority or specialized device. In the broader historical perspective, medieval urban sanitation reveals a sustained commitment to maintaining workable conditions rather than achieving perfect cleanliness. Communities accepted that challenges would persist, yet they built systems capable of keeping those challenges within tolerable bounds. Their success lay in consistency. Small tasks performed reliably across generations. This long tradition left an enduring imprint on later developments. When more advanced engineering eventually expanded capacity, it did so within cultures already accustomed to routine care, clear responsibility, and cooperative oversight. The legacy of medieval towns, therefore, is not only found in surviving streets or wells, but in the enduring understanding that a city remains livable through continuous, shared attention to the ordinary spaces everyone depends upon each day. As these shared expectations continue to guide urban life, they also influenced how communities interpreted moments when conditions briefly improved beyond the usual standard. Periods of favorable weather, reduced crowding, or successful harvests sometimes left streets clearer and wells under less strain. Rather than treating these moments as permanent change, residents tended to view them as temporary advantages that still required maintenance. This cautious outlook prevented complacency and reinforced the idea that stability depended on continued effort, not on a single fortunate season. Over time, this mindset encouraged careful observation of subtle warning signs. A slight change in the smell near a storage area, slower drainage after rainfall, or increased insects around a familiar corner signaled that routines might need adjustment. Because people were accustomed to reading their environment closely, these signals prompted early action. Small corrections, clearing debris, redirecting runoff, or increasing collection frequency often restored balance before inconvenience spread to neighboring streets. The physical arrangement of buildings contributed to this responsiveness. Doorways, thresholds, and narrow passages acted as checkpoints where residents naturally noticed shifts in ground conditions. Water seeping across a step or residue gathering along a wall could not easily be ignored when encountered daily. Architecture, therefore, functioned as a series of quiet sensors embedded in the landscape, making environmental change visible to those who moved through it. Economic rhythms reinforced the same vigilance. Workshops depended on predictable access for deliveries and customers, so even minor obstructions carried immediate cost. Craftsmen who noticed deteriorating conditions near their premises had strong incentives to address them quickly or to request assistance. In many cases, practical necessity drove maintenance faster than formal instruction could have. Shared labor arrangements continued to evolve to meet these needs. Some districts organized periodic group efforts focused on the most troublesome stretches, combining household participation with experienced workers who understood technical details. These coordinated sessions not only improved conditions but also refreshed collective memory about how specific features, such as a difficult slope or a frequently clogged channel, should be handled. The edges between different types of space required particular care. Transitions from market to residence, from workshop to street, or from interior courtyard to public lane were points where materials and movement intersected. Managing these boundaries reduced the chance that waste or standing water would spread from one area into another. Over years, small design elements, raised lips, shallow grooves, or repositioned storage helped keep these transitions orderly. Weather patterns remained a constant influence on planning. Anticipation of seasonal rains encouraged preemptive clearing of drainage paths, while extended dry periods prompted attention to dust and stagnant pools. Because such cycles repeated annually, communities developed calendars of preparation that aligned labor with expected conditions. This foresight reduced the severity of disruptions and preserved confidence that challenges were manageable. Communication through routine signals, bells, calls, or customary hours continued to synchronize effort across crowded districts. When residents knew when carts would pass or when certain routes should remain open, cooperation required less negotiation. Predictability lowered friction, allowing necessary work to proceed without undermining daily commerce. Interactions with travelers provided ongoing external feedback. Visitors quickly noticed whether streets were navigable and whether shared water sources appeared trustworthy. Their impressions, carried along trade routes, influenced how widely a town's reputation spread. Communities aware of this scrutiny often redoubled attention to visible areas near gates, bridges, and central squares, understanding that first impressions could shape long-term relationships. Material reuse remained a practical strategy for sustaining infrastructure. Stones from older structures reinforced weak edges, while salvaged timber supported covers or platforms. Reusing familiar materials reduced uncertainty, since their behavior under local conditions was already known. This continuity allowed improvements without introducing untested elements that might fail unexpectedly. Across generations, these practices cultivated a steady confidence in the city's ability to recover from minor setbacks. A blocked channel or fouled corner was inconvenient, but not alarming, because residents had seen similar issues resolved before. This collective memory reduced panic and encouraged prompt, coordinated response rather than delay. In the wider historical view, such resilience highlights the importance of habit as a form of infrastructure. Medieval towns relied less on hidden mechanisms and more on visible routines sustained by shared understanding. Their systems worked not because they eliminated problems, but because they ensured problems were addressed early and repeatedly. Through persistent attention to thresholds, transitions, and daily signals, communities maintained environments that supported dense social and economic life despite limited technology. The lesson carried forward into later centuries is clear. The durability of any urban space depends on the willingness of its inhabitants to notice small changes, respond without delay, and treat maintenance as a continuous responsibility rather than an occasional task. As these habits of early response became more deeply rooted, they also shaped how residents perceived uncertainty in other aspects of urban life. When people were accustomed to addressing small environmental problems before they spread, the same approach often extended to issues of crowding, supply, and movement. A narrowing passage might be cleared before it caused delays, or a temporary storage area might be reorganized before it interfered with deliveries. The discipline learned through sanitation quietly influenced broader patterns of problem-solving within the city. This practical mindset encouraged attention to thresholds, the points where one condition shifted into another. The entrance to a market, the mouth of a narrow lane, or the edge of a courtyard were places where congestion and contamination could easily develop. By keeping these transitions clear, residents protected the flow between spaces that served different purposes throughout the day. Over time, small architectural features such as raised stones, shallow channels, or repositioned posts helped guide movement and reduce friction. The repetition of these adjustments created a form of spatial memory shared by the community. People learned which corners required extra care after rain, which stretches of road collected debris during busy trading hours, and which wells needed closer watching in warmer weather. This knowledge was rarely written down, yet it was widely understood through experience. Because many individuals carried the same mental map of vulnerabilities, coordinated action could occur quickly when conditions shifted. Economic reliability depended heavily on this shared awareness. Merchants planned routes and schedules based on the expectation that primary corridors would remain usable. If a familiar path became obstructed, even briefly, the disruption was felt across multiple trades. Maintaining these arteries therefore received priority attention. Clearing them first ensured that the wider network of exchange, supplies arriving, goods departing, customers circulating, continued with minimal interruption. Light and visibility continued to guide when inspections were most effective. Midday brightness revealed subtle pooling or residue that might be missed in shadow, while quieter evening periods allowed heavier removal without hindering traffic. Aligning tasks with the natural cycle of light reduced errors and made limited labor more productive. Over generations, these timing choices became customary, requiring little explicit coordination. The presence of children and apprentices in daily routines also reinforced continuity. By accompanying adults during ordinary maintenance, carrying small tools, observing how runoff was redirected, or noting which areas were avoided, they absorbed practical lessons long before assuming responsibility themselves. This informal education ensured that knowledge persisted even when experienced workers were absent or conditions changed. Peripheral zones, ditches, embankments, and open ground beyond dense housing remained essential buffers. Directing excess material outward prevented accumulation where space was most constrained. Keeping these routes clear required cooperation between those inside the city and those managing adjacent land. Mutual benefit encouraged collaboration, since blocked approaches affected both urban trade and rural supply. Seasonal winds and temperature shifts continued to influence placement decisions. Areas that dispersed odor effectively were favored for temporary storage, while sheltered corners were reserved for uses less sensitive to airflow. Such choices reflected a growing sensitivity to microclimates within the urban fabric. Rather than resisting natural forces, communities learned to position activities where those forces reduced the burden of constant intervention. Reputation, carried by travelers, remained a subtle but powerful incentive. Towns known for tolerable conditions at gates and markets attracted repeat visits, while those associated with persistent obstruction or foul water risked being bypassed. Because first impressions formed quickly, visible upkeep near entry points became a priority. Clean thresholds signaled broader reliability within. Incremental record-keeping, where it existed, highlighted recurring weak spots. Repeated expenses for the same repair suggested the need for stronger materials or a slight redesign. Even simple tallies guided more efficient use of limited resources, shifting effort from constant patching toward targeted reinforcement. Over time, this pragmatic accounting reduced the frequency of disruptive failures. All of these elements, shared memory, careful timing, attention to transitions, and gradual material improvement, work together to sustain a steady urban rhythm. Medieval cities did not eliminate the challenges posed by density, but they cultivated routines that kept those challenges within manageable limits. When disruption occurred, the response drew on familiar steps already practiced many times before. In the longer arc of history, this persistence reveals that effective infrastructure is as much cultural as it is physical. The visible systems of wells, gutters, and disposal routes functioned because people expected them to be maintained and knew how to participate in that maintenance. Through continuous observation and repeated action, communities preserved the usability of crowded spaces across generations, demonstrating that enduring urban stability grows from habits that are practiced quietly, consistently, and together. As these quiet habits continued to guide daily life, they also shaped how medieval residents understood the relationship between effort and outcome. Improvements were rarely dramatic, yet the steady return of usable streets, dependable wells, and manageable waste reinforced the belief that consistent attention produced reliable results. This practical lesson, repeated across years, encouraged patience. People expected that conditions would not transform overnight, but that small, repeated actions would gradually restore balance whenever disruption appeared. Such patience influenced how communities approached crowded living. In dense quarters where space could not easily expand, residents learned to treat order as something maintained through timing and sequence rather than through physical separation alone. Activities that generated the most residue were scheduled so they did not overlap with peak movement. By staggering tasks, delivery, cleaning, disposal, the same narrow lanes could serve many purposes without becoming permanently obstructed. The importance of sequence was especially visible around shared resources. Wells, for example, functioned smoothly when drawing water, washing, and nearby traffic followed an understood rhythm. When too many actions occurred at once, confusion and contamination risk increased. Establishing customary turns or informal priorities reduced conflict and preserved the quality of the resource. Over time, these patterns became so familiar that they operated without explicit instruction. Material wear continued to provide guidance about where attention was needed most. Stones loosened by repeated cart traffic, timber darkened by moisture, or soil compacted into shallow depressions signaled points of strain within the urban fabric. Because these signs were encountered daily, they prompted early repair before damage spread. The city, in effect, communicated its needs through visible traces of use. Shared expectations also shaped how residents interpreted inconvenience. Temporary odor, noise from clearing, or brief route closures were tolerated because they were recognized as part of a cycle that restored normal conditions. This acceptance reduced resistance to necessary work. When people believed that short disruptions led to longer stability, cooperation became easier to sustain. The interplay between private initiative and communal oversight remained delicate but effective. Households addressed immediate surroundings, while broader routes and disposal areas required coordinated effort. When either side failed, the consequences were quickly apparent, encouraging a return to balance. This layered responsibility ensured that no single authority had to manage every detail, yet neglect rarely went unnoticed. Environmental awareness deepened as generations compared seasons and outcomes. Residents learned which combinations of rain and temperature produced the most difficult conditions, and they adjusted preparation accordingly. Clearing certain channels earlier, reinforcing vulnerable edges, or increasing collection frequency during warm periods helped prevent predictable problems. Experience functioned as a guidebook written in memory rather than on parchment. Movement through the city itself acted as continuous inspection. Messengers, traders, and laborers traversed the same paths repeatedly, noticing subtle changes in surface, smell, or flow. Their observations spread through conversation, prompting attention from neighbors or officials. Because information traveled along everyday routes, issues were rarely isolated for long. Peripheral landscapes continued to support urban balance. Open ground beyond dense districts absorbed materials that could not remain inside, while access paths ensured that removal remained practical. Maintaining these outward channels was as important as caring for central streets, since blockages at the edges caused accumulation within. The city's health depended on the smooth exchange between interior and exterior spaces. Over time, repeated success in managing ordinary pressures built confidence that challenges could be contained. Even when storms or sudden crowds disrupted routines, residents expected that familiar methods, clearing, redirecting, reinforcing, would restore usability. This confidence reduced panic and encouraged prompt, coordinated response. In the broader historical view, the endurance of medieval towns rested on this steady cycle of attention, feedback, and adjustment. Their sanitation systems were not hidden or automatic. They were sustained by visible effort and shared understanding. Streets remained passable because someone returned to them again and again, and water remained trusted because communities protected it through habit. The legacy of these practices is a reminder that urban stability is rarely the result of a single invention. It emerges from countless small decisions made consistently over time. Medieval cities, working with limited tools, demonstrated that livable density depends on patience, cooperation, and the willingness to treat maintenance as a permanent responsibility. Through repetition rather than spectacle, they preserved the conditions that allowed crowded settlements to function across generations. As these patterns of patience and repetition continued, they gradually shaped how residents understood the value of predictability itself. In crowded environments where many activities depended on shared space, knowing what would happen, and roughly when, reduced tension. If people could expect that a lane would be cleared after market hours or that waste would be moved along familiar routes at set times, they adjusted their own routines accordingly. Predictability became a quiet form of infrastructure, guiding behavior without the need for constant instruction. This reliability also influenced how risk was distributed across the city. Instead of allowing problems to concentrate in one place, routines were designed to move materials steadily outward. Refuse traveled along known paths, water followed established slopes, and traffic shifted to secondary routes when primary ones required attention. By spreading pressure across multiple channels, communities reduced the chance that a single failure would disrupt the entire urban system. Over years, residents developed an intuitive sense of which spaces required the most vigilance. Narrow passages where airflow was limited, corners where carts turned sharply, and low stretches where rain collected all received disproportionate attention. This selective focus conserved labor, directing effort toward areas where neglect would have the fastest consequences. Efficiency emerged not from complex planning but from accumulated experience. The texture of daily movement reinforced these priorities. People walking the same routes to wells, workshops, or places of worship encountered familiar trouble spots again and again. Each pass offered an opportunity to notice small changes: loose stones, damp patches, or lingering debris. Because many individuals shared these paths, awareness spread quickly. The city's condition was monitored collectively through ordinary travel. Shared customs also softened the boundary between obligation and habit. What may have begun as enforced rules, clearing a frontage or respecting disposal times, gradually felt like normal behavior. When actions become customary, they require less supervision to sustain. Medieval towns benefited from this transition, as maintenance tasks were carried out not only because they were required, but because they were expected as part of everyday life. Economic incentives continued to reinforce these behaviors. Traders preferred predictable routes, and customers gravitated toward areas where movement was easy and surroundings tolerable. Streets that remained orderly attracted more activity, which in turn justified continued care. Cleanliness and accessibility functioned as quiet advantages in competition with neighboring towns or districts. Material choices reflected the same long-term thinking. Where repeated repairs consumed effort, communities invested in slightly more durable solutions: thicker stone edging, better fitted covers, or improved cart designs. These upgrades did not eliminate routine work, but they reduced the frequency of disruption. Over decades, such incremental improvements lowered the background level of disorder residents had to manage. Environmental signals remained the primary guide for judging success. The sound of water moving freely after rain, the absence of persistent odor near busy crossings, and the smooth passage of wheels over familiar stones all indicated that systems were functioning. When these signals changed, attention followed without delay. Immediate feedback allowed small corrections to prevent larger failures. Interactions between districts encouraged gradual alignment of standards. If one neighborhood maintained particularly dependable conditions, others nearby often adopted similar practices to avoid being seen as neglected. Pride in local surroundings spread outward through comparison, creating a broader culture of care that extended beyond individual streets. The edges of the city continued to play a crucial role in sustaining balance. Disposal grounds, open ditches, and access roads ensured that materials moved away from dense living spaces. Keeping these boundary zones functional required cooperation with those managing adjacent land, reinforcing the interdependence between urban and rural environments. When the exchange flowed smoothly, pressure inside the walls remained manageable. Generational continuity preserved the knowledge needed to maintain this equilibrium. Younger residents absorbed practical lessons through participation, helping with small tasks, observing timing, and learning which areas demanded caution in certain seasons. Because understanding was shared widely, the system did not rely on a single expert. Many hands, guided by common memory, could restore order when needed. Across the long span of the medieval period, these intertwined habits created cities that were neither pristine nor chaotic, but consistently workable. Their sanitation depended on visible routines sustained by cooperation, observation, and incremental refinement. Stability emerged from repetition. tasks performed often enough that disruption rarely lasted. In the broader history of urban life, this experience demonstrates that effective infrastructure is as much social as it is physical. Medieval communities maintained livable density not through hidden technology, but through shared expectations about care for common space. By treating maintenance as an ongoing responsibility rather than an occasional response, they preserved the conditions that allowed markets, homes, and institutions to function side by side across generations. As these shared expectations matured further, they began to influence how residents interpreted the meaning of order within their surroundings. Order was not understood as the absence of all waste or inconvenience, but as the presence of reliable patterns that kept disruption brief. A street might still become muddy after heavy rain, yet if it was cleared quickly and returned to use, the system was considered successful. This practical definition allowed communities to function without chasing unattainable perfection. Such thinking encouraged flexibility within stable routines. When unexpected pressures appeared, an unusually large market day, a damaged cart blocking a passage, or a sudden influx of travelers, people adjusted timing rather than abandoning established methods. Cleaning might begin earlier, disposal routes might be extended, or temporary storage points might be used. Because these adjustments built on familiar practices, they could be implemented without confusion. The physical layout of many towns gradually reflected this balance between stability and adaptability. Main corridors were kept as clear as possible because they carried the greatest volume of movement, while smaller lanes absorbed activities that could tolerate brief obstruction. This informal hierarchy of space helped ensure that essential circulation continued even when secondary areas required attention. Repeated exposure to seasonal cycles strengthened this spatial awareness. Residents knew which routes became difficult in prolonged rain, which courtyards dried quickly in sunlight, and which wells required closer watch during warmer months. These observations guided where effort was concentrated at different times of year. Rather than applying equal attention everywhere, labor followed predictable environmental patterns. Community reputation remained closely tied to these visible outcomes. Visitors entering through gates or crossing central squares formed impressions within moments. If those first spaces appeared orderly and usable, the town was remembered as dependable. Maintaining these focal points therefore carried symbolic weight alongside practical benefit, reinforcing the incentive to keep shared areas presentable. Tools and methods continued to evolve through small refinements. Containers were shaped to reduce spillage, cart paths were adjusted to avoid sharp turns, and covers were fitted more securely over vulnerable pits. Each improvement addressed a specific recurring inconvenience. Over decades, the accumulation of such changes reduced the frequency of interruptions that once demanded immediate response. Communication between neighbors played a steady role in sustaining these gains. Informal agreements about when to move materials, where to place temporary storage, or how to share access to narrow passages prevented conflicts that could otherwise stall maintenance. Because these understandings were renewed through daily interaction, they adapted as populations shifted or new households arrived. Environmental cues continued to guide judgment. Clearer runoff after storms, quicker drying of previously damp corners, and fewer obstructions along familiar routes signaled that adjustments were working. When conditions worsened, the contrast was obvious, prompting renewed effort. This constant feedback loop allowed communities to refine routines without relying on formal measurement. The relationship between interior and exterior spaces remained essential. Materials that could not be managed within dense districts were directed outward along established paths, while resources from surrounding land, timber, clay, straw, returned inward to support repairs. Keeping these exchanges steady prevented accumulation inside and ensured that maintenance could continue even during periods of limited trade. Generational continuity preserved not only techniques but also attitudes. Younger residents learned that shared spaces required attention not as an occasional duty, but as a normal part of belonging to the town. By the time responsibility passed to them, the expectation of participation was already internalized. This cultural inheritance proved as important as any physical structure. Over long stretches of time, the cumulative effect of these practices was a city that could absorb routine strain without losing function. Streets might narrow with crowding, wells might demand extra care in dry seasons, and disposal routes might need periodic adjustment, yet none of these challenges led to lasting breakdown. The system endured because it was designed to be revisited and corrected repeatedly. In the wider historical perspective, medieval sanitation appears as a sustained exercise in managing limits rather than eliminating them. Communities accepted that density brought constant pressures, and they responded with habits that kept those pressures within tolerable bounds. Their success was measured by continuity, the ability to keep markets open, homes supplied, and movement possible year after year. This long tradition left a durable legacy. When later centuries introduced more advanced engineering, those innovations succeeded most readily where the underlying culture of routine care already existed. The expectation that common spaces must be maintained, quietly, consistently, and together, had been established through generations of practice. Medieval towns, through disciplined repetition, demonstrated that the true foundation of urban stability is not a single invention, but the enduring willingness of a community to tend the ordinary conditions on which everyday life depends. As these traditions of steady care extended across generations, they also shaped how medieval residents understood the passage of improvement itself. Change was rarely marked by a single moment when conditions suddenly became better. Instead, progress appeared as a quiet reduction in the frequency of disruption. Streets that once required constant clearing needed attention less often. Wells that had been vulnerable after storms remained usable for longer stretches. The absence of repeated problems became the clearest sign that routines were working. This gradual easing of pressure influenced how labor was organized. When certain areas proved more stable, effort could be redirected toward locations that still showed strain. In this way, maintenance was not evenly distributed but continually adjusted in response to visible need. The city functioned like a living system, shifting attention toward the points where imbalance threatened to emerge. Memory of earlier difficulties remained an important guide in these decisions. Residents remembered which routes had once flooded, which corners had trapped debris, and which storage spots had produced persistent odor. Even after improvements reduced these issues, the knowledge was not discarded. Extra vigilance continued in those locations, ensuring that old problems did not quietly return. The physical environment preserved these lessons. Slightly raised edges along a lane, a reinforced section of gutter, or a well surrounded by more substantial stonework all signaled places where past experience had prompted change. Newcomers, observing these features, could infer where caution was necessary. The landscape itself became a teacher, transmitting practical knowledge without written explanation. Economic life benefited from this growing predictability. Traders could plan routes with greater confidence, knowing that primary passages would remain open most days of the year. Workshops could schedule deliveries without frequent delay. Customers, encountering fewer obstacles, moved more freely between districts. These small efficiencies accumulated, strengthening the overall rhythm of exchange that sustained urban prosperity. Shared expectations also reduced the need for constant enforcement. When most residents accepted that certain tasks would be performed at familiar times, clearing after market hours, moving refuse along known paths, cooperation became habitual. Authority still existed, but it was supported by custom rather than relying solely on penalties. The city's order rested as much on agreement as on regulation. Natural cycles continued to shape preparation. Before seasons known for heavy rain or increased heat, attention shifted toward vulnerable points, low streets, enclosed courtyards, and sensitive water sources. Because these patterns repeated year after year, communities developed a practical calendar of maintenance. Anticipation reduced the severity of disruptions and shortened the time required for recovery. The role of sound in coordinating effort remained significant. Bells or public calls marked transitions when certain routes needed to remain clear or when removal could proceed with minimal interference. These signals allowed large groups to adjust behavior simultaneously without direct instruction. Over time, the sequence of sounds became part of the city's identity, linking temporal order with spatial upkeep. Peripheral zones continued to act as pressure valves for dense districts. Materials moved outward along established corridors, and open ground absorbed what could not remain inside. Maintaining these external paths was essential, since any obstruction at the edges quickly led to accumulation within. The health of central spaces depended on the reliability of these less visible routes. Generational teaching ensured that practical skills did not fade. Young residents learned how to recognize early signs of blockage, how to position containers to prevent spillage, and how to judge when a channel required clearing. This knowledge, passed through observation and participation, created a broad base of competence. The system did not depend on a few specialists. Many people understood enough to act when needed. Over long periods, the cumulative result was a city capable of absorbing routine shocks without losing function. A sudden storm might disrupt drainage for a day, or a crowded festival might strain disposal routes, yet familiar responses restored balance quickly. Confidence in these responses reduced anxiety and encouraged prompt cooperation. In the broader history of urban development, this pattern illustrates that resilience often emerges from repetition rather than innovation alone. Medieval towns sustained dense populations by refining ordinary practices until they became dependable. Their sanitation systems were visible, labor-intensive, and imperfect, yet they kept essential processes within manageable limits. The enduring lesson is that stability grows from continuous attention. By returning again and again to the same tasks, clearing, protecting, redirecting, repairing, communities preserved the usability of shared space across centuries. Long before hidden pipes and modern engineering expanded capacity, medieval cities demonstrated that the foundations of urban life rest on habits maintained patiently, collectively, and without interruption. As this patient cycle of attention continued, it gradually shaped how medieval communities understood the meaning of resilience. Resilience was not seen as the ability to avoid disruption entirely, but as the capacity to return familiar spaces to working order with minimal delay. When a street became obstructed or a water source required cleaning, the expectation was not that such events would never happen again, but that they could be addressed quickly through known routines. Confidence rested on recovery rather than on permanent prevention. This outlook influenced how labor was prioritized after disturbances. The first efforts typically focused on restoring movement, clearing the main routes that connected markets, wells, and gates. Once circulation resumed, attention shifted to secondary spaces such as smaller lanes or storage corners. By reestablishing the city's basic flow before perfecting every detail, Communities ensured that daily life could continue while remaining repairs were completed. The visibility of this process reinforced public trust. Residents could see carts removing debris, neighbors sweeping thresholds, and workers reopening blocked channels. These actions signaled that disruption was temporary and manageable. Even when conditions were uncomfortable for a short time, the presence of coordinated effort reduced uncertainty and discouraged panic. Spatial memory played an important role in guiding these responses. People remembered which passages offered alternative routes when primary streets were crowded or under repair. This knowledge allowed traffic to redistribute naturally, preventing pressure from concentrating in a single location. Over generations, such mental maps became widely shared, enabling the city to adapt without formal direction. Seasonal repetition strengthened these patterns. After several years of observing how certain rains affected particular districts, residents anticipated where intervention would be needed first. Tools and materials were prepared in advance, and experienced workers positioned themselves where their skills would be most useful. Preparation transformed recurring challenges into familiar tasks rather than unexpected crises. The relationship between maintenance and reputation remained closely linked. Visitors who arrived shortly after a disturbance often judged a town by how quickly order had been restored. Streets that were cleared promptly and wells returned to use suggested a community capable of managing its environment. This perception influenced whether traders lingered, returned, or recommended the route to others. Architectural details continued to evolve in response to repeated strain. Corners vulnerable to will damage received protective stones, and surfaces that retained water were subtly reshaped to encourage runoff. These adjustments were rarely dramatic, yet each reduced the likelihood that the same problem would recur with equal severity. Over time, the built environment itself embodied lessons learned from past interruptions. Shared responsibility remained the foundation of this system. Households addressed immediate surroundings, while organized crews handled tasks that extended across multiple properties. When either level faltered, the effects were quickly visible, prompting renewed cooperation. This layered approach allowed the city to function even when resources were limited, because many small contributions combined into a larger stabilizing force. Environmental awareness also deepened through comparison between years. Residents noticed when a season was wetter or warmer than usual and adjusted routines accordingly, clearing more frequently, protecting water sources more carefully, or redirecting storage away from vulnerable spots. Flexibility within familiar patterns helped maintain balance despite changing conditions. Communication through routine signals, bells, calls, and customary hours continued to synchronize effort across crowded districts. When people expected certain routes to be cleared at known times, they planned movement to avoid conflict. This predictability reduced friction between necessary maintenance and everyday commerce. Peripheral areas again proved essential during recovery. Disposal grounds and outer ditches absorbed materials removed from dense neighborhoods, preventing temporary accumulation from becoming a lasting problem. Keeping these outward channels functional ensured that interior spaces could return to normal use quickly. Over long stretches of time, these repeated cycles of disruption and restoration produced a durable confidence in the city's ability to endure. Residents did not assume that challenges would disappear, but they trusted that established methods would contain them. This trust encouraged continued investment of labor, materials, and attention in the routines that made dense living possible. In the wider historical perspective, medieval sanitation reveals a culture shaped by steady adaptation rather than sudden transformation. Systems were designed to be revisited, corrected, and improved in small increments. Their effectiveness depended less on technology than on the willingness of many individuals to act when familiar signals appeared. The enduring insight from this long experience is that urban stability emerges from practiced response. By maintaining shared knowledge of how to clear, protect, and restore common spaces, medieval communities ensured that interruptions remained temporary. Through repetition, cooperation, and careful observation, they preserved the conditions necessary for trade, residence, and civic life to continue across generations, even in environments where resources and tools were limited. As this practiced response became embedded in daily life, it gradually influenced how communities perceived the passage of ordinary time within the city. Days were not only marked by markets opening or bells announcing prayer, but also by the quiet sequence of tasks that kept shared spaces usable. The clearing of a lane, the inspection of a well, or the movement of refuse along a familiar route formed a background rhythm that residents came to expect. When that rhythm continued uninterrupted, the city felt stable even if larger political or economic conditions were uncertain. This stability depended heavily on anticipation. People learned to act before inconvenience became visible to everyone. If rain was expected, vulnerable channels were checked in advance. If a busy trading day approached, storage areas were organized to prevent overflow. Acting early reduced the scale of later effort, allowing small adjustments to replace more disruptive repairs. Over time, anticipation became as important as reaction. The built environment encouraged this foresight. Slight slopes, raised thresholds, and clearly defined edges along pathways guided water and movement without requiring constant supervision. These features reduced the number of decisions residents had to make in the moment, freeing attention for areas where conditions changed more quickly. Infrastructure, even in its simplest form, supported habit by making the preferred behavior the easiest one to follow. Shared observation reinforced the same process. Because many people passed through central routes each day, changes were noticed quickly. A loose stone, a damp patch, or lingering debris rarely remained unseen for long. Information spread through conversation in markets and workshops, prompting either informal action or organized response. The city monitored itself through the routine presence of its inhabitants. Economic activity continued to benefit from this quiet vigilance. Predictable conditions meant that deliveries arrived on time, customers could reach stalls without difficulty, and craftsmen avoided unnecessary delays. Each successful transaction depended on dozens of small environmental factors remaining within acceptable limits. Sanitation, though rarely discussed directly, underpinned the reliability that commerce required. Seasonal repetition strengthened confidence in these methods. After several cycles of managing similar weather patterns, residents trusted that familiar preparations, clearing specific gutters, protecting certain wells, adjusting collection times, would be sufficient. Even when conditions varied, the existence of a known starting point reduced uncertainty. Experience provided a framework for adaptation rather than forcing communities to begin anew each year. Social expectations also encouraged continuity. Participating in maintenance signaled commitment to the shared welfare of the neighborhood. Those who contributed regularly were seen as dependable partners in other areas of life, from trade to mutual aid. In this way, practical tasks reinforced broader networks of trust that extended beyond sanitation itself. Peripheral routes remained essential to sustaining interior order. Materials moved outward along paths kept deliberately clear, while resources for repair, stone, timber, clay, returned inward through the same channels. Maintaining this exchange prevented pressure from building within dense districts and ensured that upkeep could continue even when central spaces were crowded. Tools and techniques evolved through repeated use. Workers adjusted grips, improved balance on carts, and refined methods for lifting or sealing containers to reduce spillage. These refinements saved time and energy, allowing the same workforce to manage growing populations without proportional increases in disruption. Efficiency emerged from familiarity with tasks performed countless times. Over generations, the accumulation of these practices created an environment where minor disturbances no longer threatened overall function. A blocked corner or temporary odor was understood as a routine challenge with a known solution. Because residents had witnessed many successful recoveries, they approached new problems with measured response rather than alarm. In the broader historical context, this steady pattern reveals that medieval urban life was sustained by a culture of continuous attention. Infrastructure did not operate independently of people. It depended on habits that kept it effective. Wells remained trustworthy because they were protected repeatedly, and streets stayed usable because they were cleared again and again. The enduring lesson is that urban resilience is built from ordinary actions performed consistently over long periods. Medieval communities, working within tight constraints, demonstrated that dense settlements can remain livable when shared spaces are treated as ongoing responsibilities. Through anticipation, cooperation, and incremental refinement, they preserved the conditions necessary for daily movement, exchange, and residence, showing that the strength of a city often rests not in grand structures, but in the quiet persistence of its routines. As these routines settled ever more firmly into the fabric of urban life, they also began to shape how medieval residents interpreted responsibility across different scales of the community. Care for a single doorway, a shared lane, or a public square was understood as part of the same continuum. The condition of one space affected the next, and small neglect in a private corner could gradually influence a broader route. This awareness encouraged people to see maintenance not as isolated chores, but as contributions to a larger, interconnected system. Over time, this interconnected view changed how inconvenience was tolerated. Temporary noise from clearing, the passage of waste carts at predictable hours, or brief restrictions on movement were accepted because their purpose was widely understood. Residents recognized that these interruptions were part of a cycle that returned the environment to a usable state. Acceptance reduced resistance, allowing necessary work to proceed without prolonged dispute. The city's physical form continued to reinforce these expectations. Slight ridges along pathways, carefully placed stones at turning points, and shallow channels guiding runoff all directed behavior without the need for constant supervision. These features functioned as quiet instructions embedded in the landscape. Even newcomers, unfamiliar with local customs, could follow the logic of movement and disposal simply by observing how space had been shaped. Shared observation remained a powerful tool. Because many individuals crossed the same central areas each day, changes were quickly noticed and discussed. A damp patch where none had been before, a persistent smell near a storage point, or debris collecting at a familiar corner prompted conversation that often led to swift action. Information moved through ordinary social contact, creating a distributed system of awareness that required little formal coordination. Economic rhythms depended on this steady attentiveness. Markets functioned smoothly when surrounding routes stayed clear and when waste from previous trading was removed on schedule. Vendors and customers alike benefited from environments that returned to order overnight. This reliability encouraged repeat activity, reinforcing the connection between sanitation and sustained commercial life. Seasonal knowledge deepened with each passing decade. Communities refined their sense of when particular areas would need extra care. Low streets during prolonged rain, enclosed courtyards during warmer spells, and busy intersections during harvest markets. Preparation shifted accordingly, concentrating effort where experience suggested pressure would be greatest. Such targeted action conserved labor while preserving overall stability. The relationship between interior districts and outer zones remained essential. Materials moved outward along established paths to areas where decomposition or storage posed fewer risks, while supplies for repair traveled inward from surrounding land. Keeping these exchanges smooth prevented accumulation within dense neighborhoods and ensured that maintenance could continue even when central spaces were crowded. Generational teaching preserved both technique and attitude. Younger residents learned not only how to clear a channel or secure a cover, but why these tasks mattered for the functioning of the whole. Participation in routine upkeep fostered a sense of belonging, reinforcing the idea that shared spaces depended on shared effort. This cultural continuity proved as important as any physical structure. Over long stretches of time, the accumulation of small improvements reduced the frequency of serious disruption. Slightly better slopes encouraged faster runoff, sturdier edges resisted wear, and clearer schedules minimized overlap between conflicting activities. None of these changes transformed the city at once, yet together they lowered the background level of disorder that residents had to manage each day. When disturbances did occur, after storms, fires, or sudden crowds, the response drew on familiar sequences. Restore movement along main routes, protect water sources, remove excess material, and then address secondary spaces. Because these steps were widely understood, recovery began quickly and proceeded with little confusion. Confidence in the process helped maintain calm during periods of strain. In the broader arc of urban history, medieval sanitation reveals a society oriented toward preservation of function rather than pursuit of perfection. Communities accepted that waste, water, and crowding would always present challenges. Their achievement lay in creating habits strong enough to keep those challenges within tolerable limits through repetition and cooperation. The enduring insight from this long experience is that a livable city depends on continuous, shared attention to ordinary conditions. Medieval towns, working with modest tools and incomplete knowledge, sustained dense populations by treating maintenance as a permanent civic practice. Through steady observation, incremental adjustment, and collective responsibility, they preserved the usability of streets, wells, and public spaces across generations, demonstrating that the quiet work of upkeep is often the true foundation of urban endurance. As this culture of continual upkeep persisted, it gradually shaped how medieval communities thought about time not as a series of isolated events, but as a chain of repeated obligations. The city did not become clean once and remain so. Instead, cleanliness was something renewed day after day through familiar actions. This understanding encouraged a steady pace of work that favored consistency over intensity. Rather than waiting for conditions to deteriorate and then responding with large efforts. Communities preferred smaller, frequent interventions that prevented visible decline. A gutter cleared while still passable required far less labor than one left to harden with debris. A well inspected after the first sign of cloudiness could be protected before it became unusable. This preference for early, modest action reduced both cost and disruption, allowing daily routines to continue with minimal interruption. Over time, these repeated interventions created a dependable cadence within the city. Residents came to expect that certain spaces would be tended at predictable intervals, even if no immediate problem was visible. The act of maintenance itself became a reassurance. Seeing familiar tasks performed, sweeping, carrying, clearing, signaled that shared responsibilities were being honored and that the environment remained under collective care. This cadence also influenced how people allocated attention. Because effort was spread across many small moments rather than concentrated in rare campaigns, no single task appeared overwhelming. The burden of upkeep was distributed across days and across households, making participation feel manageable. In crowded settings where large disruptions could halt trade or movement, this steady approach proved more sustainable than occasional dramatic cleanups. The physical layout of streets and courtyards supported this rhythm. Surfaces shaped to guide runoff reduced the need for constant correction, while clearly defined edges indicated where debris tended to gather. These cues helped residents focus their work efficiently. Instead of searching for problems, they returned to known points of accumulation and addressed them before conditions worsened. Shared experience reinforced confidence in these methods. When people repeatedly witnessed small efforts restoring normal conditions, they trusted that similar actions would succeed in the future. This trust shortened response times during new disturbances because hesitation was replaced by familiarity. The city's past recoveries became a practical guide for present decisions. Economic activity benefited directly from this predictability. Merchants and craftsmen relied on routes that remained usable from one day to the next. Even slight improvements in reliability, fewer blocked passages, quicker removal of refuse, reduced delays that might otherwise ripple through supply and exchange. Over months and years, these marginal gains accumulated into more stable patterns of trade. Seasonal preparation continued to fit within the same framework. Before periods known for heavier rain or increased heat, residents intensified routine tasks rather than inventing entirely new ones. Channels were cleared more frequently, storage was adjusted, and sensitive water sources received extra attention. Because these measures extended familiar habits, they could be implemented quickly without confusion. Communication through customary signals helped coordinate these efforts across dense neighborhoods. Bells, calls, or widely understood hours indicated when certain routes should remain open or when maintenance would pass through. Predictable timing reduced conflict between necessary work and everyday movement, allowing both to proceed without friction. The relationship between central spaces and outer zones remained essential to sustaining balance. Materials moved outward along established paths, preventing accumulation where density was greatest. At the same time, resources needed for repair, timber, stone, clay, returned inward through the same corridors. Maintaining this exchange ensured that upkeep could continue even when the city experienced temporary strain. Generational learning preserved not only techniques but also the expectation that upkeep would never truly end. Younger residents grew accustomed to seeing adults perform routine tasks and gradually took part themselves. By the time responsibility shifted, the idea that shared spaces required ongoing attention felt natural rather than imposed. Across long stretches of time, this steady cadence produced a city that rarely reached extremes of disorder. Conditions fluctuated, but they were brought back within workable limits before serious breakdown occurred. The goal was not perfection, but continuity, the assurance that streets, wells, and gathering places would remain broadly usable. In the wider historical perspective, medieval sanitation demonstrates how stability can emerge from repetition. Without complex machinery, communities relied on habits that kept environmental pressures contained. Their systems succeeded because they were designed to be revisited constantly, with small corrections preventing large failures. The lasting lesson is that urban resilience depends less on occasional heroic effort and more on ordinary actions performed consistently. By choosing frequent, manageable interventions over delayed, disruptive ones, medieval towns preserved the conditions necessary for daily life to proceed. Through patience, cooperation, and a shared sense of responsibility, they sustained dense settlements across generations, showing that the quiet discipline of maintenance is often the strongest foundation a city can possess.